Hey creepy crew. Before we start, I wanted to let you know I also have a second channel, Mr. Creepiness Uncut. That's where I post stories that didn't make it to the main channel. If you want even more creepy content, make sure to subscribe over there too. The link is in the description. So I'm kinda obsessed with gaming. Like, I'll skip sleep if I get hooked on something. But when the PlayStation 5 launched, I was broke. I kept refreshing listings on this sketchy classified site. Not Craigslist, but similar. Hoping someone would list one without realizing how high they could have priced it. After a few weeks of hunting, I spotted a listing that seemed too good to be true. Like, it was way below market price. The guy's name was Rick, and he messaged me back within the hour. We went back and forth a bit, and he suggested meeting up at the Walmart about 10 minutes from my apartment in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Not where I live now, thankfully. I had my doubts, because, stranger danger. But the idea of scoring a PS5 finally pushed me over. I got there a little early and did the usual awkward parking lot loop, pretending to text while trying to spot him. The only image I had was this grainy, low-res photo he sent, basically a blur with some skin tone. But then I saw this dude leaning on an old rust-colored Honda Civic, and I just knew it was him. He was huge. Like legit gym bro size, probably late 30s, with shaved hair and tats climbing both arms. Honestly, he looked like someone who collects debts for a living. I froze for a second, then gathered my nerve and walked up. "You the one looking for the PlayStation?" he asked. His voice had that smoker's rasp. "Yeah, that's me," I said, forcing a smile like I wasn't panicking inside. "Are you Rick?" He nodded and jerked his thumb toward his car. "Yup. Come on. It's over here." I trailed him a bit nervously. His car looked like it had been through several natural disasters. Dented doors, weird smells, fast food wrappers on the dashboard. Red flag number 1. He opened the driver's door, glanced over his shoulder and said, "Hop in." "Wait, you don't have it with you?" "Nah, it's at my place. Didn't have time to bring it. Just get in, we'll swing by real quick." That's when every alarm bell in my body went full DEFCON 1. Like, bruh, you're selling a console, not hosting a barbecue. "What do you mean you didn't have time to put it in your car?" I stammered something like, crap. I just remembered I promised my roommate I'd grab something, and started backing away like I was late for a dentist appointment. Rick just stood there, not saying anything, arms crossed, staring at me like he was trying to decide whether I was worth the effort. I walked faster, then full-on speed, walked out of the parking lot, doing that quick glance over the shoulder every few seconds. Luckily, he didn't follow me. Just stood there with that same cold stare, like I'd wasted his time. I thought about calling the police, but technically, the guy didn't break any laws. I mean, I couldn't exactly tell a cop. He invited me into his car and it felt creepy, right? Still, I'm convinced he wasn't trying to sell me a PS5. He was trying to sell me some kind of horror movie ending, and I noped out just in time. Last spring, after I finally upgraded to a newer car, one with backup cams and Bluetooth, thank God, I decided to list my old ride on Craigslist. I'd used it before to flip furniture and random garage sale stuff, so I figured I'd try my luck again. Predictably, the first wave of replies was full of nonsense. One dude offered me $300 and a microwave. Another one wanted to trade me a pair of purebred puppies, which, no thanks. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message from this guy named Trent. He said he'd pay the exact amount I listed. No haggling, no questions. Honestly, I had already priced the car low to move it fast, so that felt too good to be true. We agreed to meet at a Valero not too far from where I live, in a sleepy corner of Longmont, Oregon. When I pulled into the lot, I spotted this guy leaning against a rusty old Ford Ranger. No one else was around, so I figured it had to be Trent. He was short, kind of built like a tree stump, with a scruffy beard and shiny bald head that looked like it had been freshly waxed. Not gonna lie, there was something off about his vibe, but I reminded myself I've watched too many crime shows and maybe needed to chill. I waved him over, climbed into the passenger seat of my car, and let him hop in behind the wheel for the test drive. We rolled out of the gas station, and immediately I started feeling weird about the whole thing. Trent had this intense energy, like the kind of guy who probably knew way too much about engines but would also 100% argue with a cashier over a coupon. As we drove, he peppered me with questions about the car. Like, a lot of questions. Stuff about the catalytic converter, fuel injectors, even the tire tread pattern. I know the basics, but this guy, he was on another level. I started to wonder if he was trying to find an excuse to knock the price down. But nope. He straight up told me he'd pay the full amount, cash in hand. I was kinda stunned. Who buys a used car without even trying to shave a few bucks off? But hey, I wasn't complaining. We ended up heading over to the DMV to handle all the paperwork. Trent handed me what looked like a legit cashier's check. Clean, crisp, with all the little watermarks and numbers that make you feel like you're holding money in paper form. I was pumped. I actually smiled walking into my credit union like I'd just pulled off a miracle. That car had been sitting in my driveway for months collecting bird crap and bad memories, and now it was finally out of my life. I went straight to the teller. This younger woman with bright pink glasses and a tired look like she'd been on her feet since sunrise. I slid the check across the counter and told her I'd like to deposit it. She glanced down, then back up at me like I just handed her a slice of cheese instead of money. She didn't say much, just that she'd be right back, which is rarely ever a good sign in a bank. A minute later, she returned with a guy in a button-up shirt and a neck tattoo just peeking above the collar. Manager, I guessed. He looked at the check, looked at me, and said, "Sir, this check's no good. It's counterfeit." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd just hit a pothole the size of a kiddie pool. I just stood there like an idiot, trying to process it. I told them I had just sold my car, that I met the guy, that he seemed, well, not great, but real. The manager gave me one of those pitying expressions people give when they don't want to say, "You got played." But that's clearly what's happening. I ran outside and immediately called the number Trent had texted me from, straight to voicemail. I emailed him too, even tried WhatsApp like some desperate dad looking for his kid's lost Xbox login. Nothing. Ghosted. That's when it hit me. I never actually got any solid info from him. No ID, no plate number from that truck, not even a real address. For all I know, Trent could have been a fake name, and that beat-up Ranger was probably stolen or borrowed for the day. I felt like a complete idiot. I mean, I'm not exactly new to this stuff. I've bought and sold on Craigslist for years. Usually face-to-face deals are the safer bet. You shake hands, you talk, you get a vibe. But this time, I got suckered. The worst part? I couldn't even bring myself to tell my girlfriend about it. She's always joking about how I think I'm too clever to ever get scammed. And I believed it. I really thought I had that sixth sense or whatever. This one blindsided me. I kept Googling things like Craigslist fake cashier check recovery and how to catch a scammer who stole your car. But it all pointed to the same conclusion. Unless you've got a plate, VIN, or security cam footage, it's gone. The car, my money, my pride, just gone. I hate that it's so easy for people to pull this off. Honestly, I don't even care about the car anymore. It's the fact that I let it happen that keeps me up at night. My name's Josh, and this weird, sketchy thing happened to me about 2 summers back. I had this fancy DSLR camera, like top-of-the-line stuff, that I'd barely used. There was a phase when I was all into photography, but work and life kind of pushed that hobby to the side. So I decided to sell it, and instead of dealing with shipping nonsense, I threw it up on Craigslist hoping someone local would want it. Got a bunch of replies, and one that stood out was from this dude who called himself Rick. His first message? He offered me less than half the price I'd listed. I was kind of pissed and told him I wasn't desperate, but he just wouldn't let up. Kept sending messages every day, all these tiny offers that barely moved up. It got annoying fast. Eventually though, maybe a week later, Rick sends an offer that's not terrible, not what I wanted, but decent enough to make me consider it. I thought, fine, let's just get this over with. We set up a meeting at a subway station in East Pine, which wasn't too far from my place. I figured it'd be public and chill. When I got there, things felt off immediately. There were 3 guys standing near the benches where we'd said we'd meet. All of them were way taller and bulkier than me. I felt like a kid in comparison. They were all staring directly at me like they'd been expecting me for hours. I felt my stomach drop. Still, I tried to keep it together. "Hey, Rick?" I asked, walking toward them with what I hoped looked like confidence. "Yo," the one in the middle answered, giving me a lopsided grin that didn't feel friendly at all. I gave a quick nod to the other 2, trying to act casual, but my skin was crawling. I had that weird animal instinct thing telling me to turn around and leave, but I stayed. Dumb, I know. "So, you got the camera?" Rick asked. I nodded, pulling it from my backpack. "Yeah, like I said in the post, it's basically like new." Rick grabbed it and started inspecting every inch of it. He was flipping switches, checking buttons, turning the lens like he was about to discover a hidden treasure map. The other 2 just watched, barely blinking. They kept glancing between me and the camera, like they were waiting for some signal or something. After what felt like 10 years, Rick handed it back to me and scowled. "Nah, this thing ain't worth what you're asking," he said, voice way more aggressive than before. I kinda expected that, honestly, but it still hit hard. "We already agreed on the price," I told him. "I can't really go any lower than that." All 3 of them suddenly felt closer. It's hard to explain, but the energy shifted, like they were about to surround me or something. I stood my ground, though my hands were getting clammy. Rick stepped right up into my space, so close I could smell whatever he had for lunch. "Listen, man, I'm doing you a solid by offering you this much. You should be grateful." Something about the way he said that just ticked me off. I took a half step back and straightened up. "I'm sticking to the price. You want it or not." Rick's expression turned nasty, and without a word, he lifted his shirt just high enough for me to catch a glimpse of a gun tucked into his waistband. My entire body went cold. The 2 other guys didn't say a word, just stood there, faces like stone. Rick pointed right at me and said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take what I'm giving you, and you're handing over the camera. End of story." My brain just kind of short-circuited for a second. I was frozen in place, trying to figure out if this was really happening. They had quietly moved so they were almost boxing me in, and I could feel the panic bubbling up. I didn't know if I should run, yell, or what. But the part that really sent chills down my spine wasn't even the gun. It was Rick's eyes. He had this cold, twitchy look, like there were wires loose in his head. Not the kind of guy who'd bluff. It hit me then. If I made the wrong move, he might actually do something horrible. Okay, I said quickly, raising my hands a bit. "Fine, I'll take the deal." Like flipping a switch, the tension dropped. They all backed off just enough for me to breathe again. Rick smirked like he'd just won a game. "Knew you'd wise up," he said, pulling out a thick roll of bills and shoving it at me. I counted fast. It wasn't even close to what we'd agreed on. Barely 40% of it, honestly. But I just nodded and handed over the camera. I felt gross, like I'd just given something valuable to a pack of hyenas. But I was more focused on just getting the hell out of there alive. The four of them walked off, laughing and talking like they'd just wrapped up a poker game. I stood there for a few seconds, numb, trying to make my legs work again. Eventually, I started heading home, my thoughts spinning in a dozen directions. I felt everything at once: shame, rage, fear. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to think of what I should have done differently. I should have brought someone with me. I should have picked a busier location. I should have walked away the moment I saw 3 dudes instead of 1. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I just felt small. Back at my apartment in North Briar, I sat at my crappy kitchen table, dropped the cash in front of me, and just stared at it. I didn't even want to touch it. It felt tainted, like hush money from the universe. After a while, something inside me snapped into focus. I wasn't going to just let this slide. I wasn't some passive doormat. I'd been robbed, intimidated, and humiliated. And for what? Because some guy thought he could push me around? So I grabbed my phone and called the cops. I told them everything: location, time, what Rick looked like, what the others looked like, how it went down. I gave the best descriptions I could and didn't leave anything out. The officer was calm, asked some follow-up stuff, and said they'd look into it. I didn't expect much, but a few days later, I got a call back. They'd tracked down Rick and the others. Turns out they'd been flagged before for pulling shady stuff during meetups like this. And get this, they still had my camera. Rick denied everything, of course. Claimed I changed the deal last minute, said I was trying to scam him, all that garbage. But eventually, the officer told me Rick was willing to return the camera if I gave the money back. Classic manipulator move. Make it look like he was doing me a favor. Was it ideal? Not even close. Honestly, they deserved way worse. But I agreed. Got my camera back. Lost the money. Whatever. Part of me wanted charges pressed, something official on record. But the cops said it would be tough. No real proof, no video that clearly showed threats. Just my word against theirs. Maybe they were right, maybe not. Either way, I knew the system wasn't going to do much more. So yeah, I got my camera, but the whole thing left a sour taste. They walked away with 0 consequences, just another win in their playbook. I've been telling myself to move on, that maybe it's better to just leave this in the rear view. I'd just gotten laid off and was grabbing at anything that resembled a paycheck. Bills were creeping up on me and I'd already sold off my guitar and some other junk on Facebook Marketplace. One night, while doom-scrolling Craigslist in the corner booth of a greasy diner in Ashford, small city in Indiana you've probably never heard of, I stumbled across this super bare-bones ad. It just said something like, "Need help, wah cleanup, 1 day, cash." That was it. No details, no fluff. Honestly, it screamed sketchy, but I was broke and desperate, so I emailed the guy. He wrote back almost instantly, like suspiciously fast. Said his name was Greg, told me to come by his place the next morning. Apparently his house was under renovation, and he just needed someone to tidy up the aftermath. That seemed odd to me because don't contractors usually take care of their own mess? But whatever. I figured maybe he was just picky or something. Next morning, I pedaled my beat-up Schwinn across town to this quiet neighborhood lined with trees and old mailboxes. His place was a small 2-story brick house with those weird stone gargoyle things on the porch. I knocked, half expecting no one to answer, but the door swung open and there was Greg. He looked like someone's tired gym teacher, probably mid-50s, balding with a little pooch under his shirt that looked like it had seen too many microwaved burritos. He had on a dingy white tee with what looked like dried mustard stains and some gray sweatpants that were one good stretch away from giving up completely. "Mornin'," he said with a weird sort of cheeriness, stepping back to let me in. "Hey," I muttered, taking in the living room. It was oddly neat. Light green walls, a worn-down brown couch in the center, and a glass coffee table scattered with old TV guide magazines. Who even reads those anymore? No sign of drywall dust, paint buckets, nothing that screamed renovation zone. I kind of stood there like, "This it?" But he motioned for me to follow him. He led me through a tight kitchen, past an old-school fridge covered in faded postcards, and out to the backyard. There was a weathered shed tucked behind a rusting grill. He unlocked it, and I peeked inside. Shelves lined with paint cans, tools scattered around like a toddler had a tantrum with a toolbox. "I need this organized, and, less gross," he said, waving vaguely at the chaos. I nodded. "Cool, I got it." I spent the next hour or so cleaning, tossing out old caulk tubes, wiping down shelves and stacking tools by category. The whole time, I was just trying to ignore the spiders in the corners. When I finished, I wiped my hands on my jeans and knocked on the back door. Greg let me in, nodded in approval. "Nice job," he said, kind of like a teacher giving a gold star. "Now let me show you where the real work is." That's when he took me downstairs. The basement stairs creaked like they were personally offended by the weight of human feet. We reached the bottom and I felt my stomach twist a little. It was dim, cold, with one flickering light bulb swaying slightly like it was trying to tell me something. Concrete floor, exposed pipes overhead. A single metal workbench in the corner with what looked like a stack of old VHS tapes on it. Random cardboard boxes here and there, some duct tape stuck to the walls like someone had tried to hang something heavy and gave up. Greg pointed toward the far wall. "Need you to clean up over there," he said. "There's a bit of clutter, but it won't take long," Greg said, casually gesturing at the corner like it was just an innocent pile of junk. I walked over, and yeah, it was mostly old newspapers stacked up like someone had been hoarding them since 2003, plus a layer of dust thick enough to write a novel in. I grabbed a broom and started sweeping. But something felt off. Not in a loud horror movie kind of way. Just this gnawing unease, like the air was too still or like I was being watched. Sure enough, when I looked up, Greg was just standing in the shadows, leaning against the furnace with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. Didn't say a word. While trying not to look creeped out, I accidentally knocked over one of the boxes stacked nearby. A few things spilled out, mostly random crap, but then I saw a stack of photos. I squatted down to scoop them up. Most were yellowed and curled, like they'd been sitting down there since before smartphones existed. I was about to toss them back in the box when one photo grabbed my attention, and not in a nostalgic, "aw, look at this old birthday party" way, more like, "what the actual hell am I looking at" way. It was weird. People in masks, tied up with ropes, wearing outfits that looked like they came from a cursed Renaissance fair. The vibe wasn't cosplay. It wasn't even goofy Halloween dress-up. It felt dark, staged, like a still shot from a movie no one should be watching. My stomach turned, and I suddenly wanted to get out of there. I looked up and, poof, Greg was gone. Like, gone. The basement door? Shut. I rushed over and tried the knob. Locked. "Greg?" I called, heart pounding like crazy. "Hey man, what is this?" Nothing. Silence, except for the hum of some ancient appliance in the corner. I started to freak out a bit. Like full body tingles, mind racing kind of freak out. I turned in circles, scanning for any way out, and then I noticed this tiny rectangular window way up near the ceiling. It wasn't much, looked more like a vent than a window, but it showed a sliver of daylight. I dragged a few boxes underneath and climbed up, scraping my shins and probably destroying my jeans in the process. The window latch was old, rusty, but I managed to crank it open just enough to squeeze through. Barely. I'm not a big dude, but even I thought I'd get stuck halfway like some tragic reverse Winnie the Pooh situation. I made it out though. Dropped onto the side yard and didn't stop to breathe. I sprinted straight to my bike, still chained to the mailbox out front. Fumbled with the lock like my hands had never seen numbers before. Got it loose, and pedaled like I was being chased by a demon. After a few blocks, when my legs finally stopped shaking enough to use my phone, I pulled over at a gas station and called the cops. Told them everything. They actually sent a car out and talked to Greg. But of course, he had a story ready. Said I'd come to clean and started acting paranoid and sketchy. Claimed I seemed high, and he asked me to leave, and that I probably called the police out of spite. Total garbage, obviously, but without any evidence, there wasn't much they could do. The weird photos were probably hidden by then. The locked door? Just a misunderstanding, apparently. I was beyond pissed. Not just because he got away with it, but because it felt like he'd done this before, and might do it again. Some other broke kid would answer a Craigslist ad, show up to Greg's creepy dungeon, and who knows what would happen. So I posted my own ad. I copied his title word for word and added, in all caps, "Do not trust this person, read full story." I poured out every detail, the basement, the photos, the locked door. Told people to be careful with these kinds of gigs. It felt like the least I could do. Even now, years later, I still get chills thinking about how that whole thing could have ended. Maybe he was just a creepy hoarder. Or maybe it was something way worse. Either way, I'm just glad I made it out with nothing more than a story to tell. When I was 26, I picked up a secret shopper gig I found on Craigslist. It sounded sketchy at first, but it turned out to be legit. The company emailed me assignments. I went to stores around the city, pretended to be a customer, and wrote up reports about how I was treated. I mostly visited grocery stores, pharmacies, and gas stations. They wanted to know if employees followed company policies, greeted customers, and stayed professional. I didn't need to buy anything expensive. Sometimes they reimbursed snacks or a drink just so I could have an excuse to interact with staff. It wasn't exciting work, but it helped me pay down my student loans. I'd do a few visits a week in the evenings or weekends. Sometimes I'd bring a notebook and take notes in my car right after the visit so I wouldn't forget details. There wasn't much to it. If the cashier was friendly, if someone asked if I needed help, if the place was clean. Most workers were average. Some were super friendly. Some just went through the motions. I rarely gave bad reviews unless someone was outright rude or ignored me completely. After a couple of months, I started getting assigned to repeat locations. The company rotated us so the stores wouldn't catch on, but I'd still see familiar places. One chain supermarket on the east side got flagged for low scores, so they sent me back 3 times in a month. The store itself looked fine, stocked shelves, working freezers, no smells or spills. But every time I went, the staff seemed checked out. I guessed morale was low or the manager didn't care. It wasn't a big deal, just part of the job. The 3rd time I visited that supermarket, I was asked to specifically evaluate the deli counter. I got there late afternoon, around 5:30 p.m. The parking lot was half full, sun still out, warm air. I walked through the entrance with my phone set to record in my pocket. just in case something unusual happened. That day I was told to interact with the deli guy, see if he answered questions, offered samples, and stayed polite. There was a guy working there, Jason, according to his name tag. He looked mid-30s, buzz cut, stubble, average build. He wore the standard apron and gloves, but looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. As I watched from the bakery aisle, I noticed how he handled customers. First, a woman asked about the roasted turkey slices. He rolled his eyes and said, "It's on the label." Then an older man asked if they had low-sodium ham, and Jason turned his back and shrugged before even checking. I waited until no one else was in line, then stepped up. I asked about sandwich options and if they had any specials. He didn't look at me, just mumbled, "What do you want?" I tried to keep it casual, asked what he recommended. He said, "Doesn't matter," and pointed to the board without lifting his head. His tone was flat, and it felt like he was trying to end the conversation. I ordered a small roast beef sub. He made it in silence, slapped it in the wrapper, handed it over without a word. I thanked him. He didn't respond. I wandered through the rest of the store after that, grabbed some snacks to make the trip look real. As I walked the canned goods aisle, I caught Jason looking at me from the end of the row. He was standing near the pharmacy, arms crossed, just watching. When I glanced at him, he turned and walked away like he wasn't doing anything. I figured maybe he thought I was corporate or a mystery shopper. Sometimes employees guessed, though they weren't supposed to. I paid at self-checkout, left the store, and started walking to my car. The parking lot was still half full, light fading a bit. That's when I saw him again. Jason was standing by a dark red pickup near the edge of the lot, smoking a cigarette. He was leaning against the passenger door, eyes locked on me. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared. I unlocked my car with the fob, got in slowly, trying not to make eye contact. I told myself maybe he was just tired or irritated about work. He kept watching until I backed out and drove off. I submitted the report the same night, gave all the details, how Jason acted toward customers, how he treated me, the way he stared in the aisles, and the weirdness in the parking lot. I didn't exaggerate anything, just laid it out like I saw it. Honestly, I expected the company to maybe issue a warning or give him training. I didn't think much more about it. Moved on to the next assignment. 3 days later, it was a Thursday night. I remember because I just finished watching something on Netflix and was brushing my teeth. Around 11 p.m., I heard this sudden, loud pounding at my apartment door. It wasn't knocking. It was like someone was trying to break it down. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, listening. Then I heard a man's voice yelling my name, over and over. "Open up! I know you're in there! You think you can ruin someone's life and hide?" I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Jason. He looked rough, hair a mess, shirt untucked, pacing and then slamming his hand on the door again. "You got me fired! You happy now? Huh? You think that's funny?" He kept repeating himself, cursing, shouting. My heart was racing, but I didn't know what to do. I had my phone in my hand, and I was about to call 911, but I hesitated. He hadn't done anything yet, just yelling. I wasn't sure if that counted as enough. I thought maybe he'd leave after a few minutes. Maybe he was just drunk and blowing off steam. But he didn't leave. The pounding got harder. The whole door was shaking in the frame, and his voice turned from angry to manic. "You owe me! You owe me for this! You cost me everything, and I'm not leaving till you pay." I backed away from the door, went into my bedroom, and locked the door behind me. I finally called 911 and told them a man I didn't know personally was trying to break into my apartment. The operator asked if I was in a safe spot and told me to stay on the line. I could still hear Jason outside. It sounded like he was kicking the door now. Each hit was loud, violent. Then I heard something metallic. Maybe he threw something at the door, or maybe it was his belt buckle hitting it as he slammed against it. I couldn't tell. The operator kept saying help was on the way, that units were close. But every second felt stretched. I held my breath every time the door shook, just waiting for it to give in. Then, suddenly it stopped. No more yelling, no more kicking, just silence. I thought he left. I crept to the living room, stayed low, peeked out the blinds. I couldn't see him. That's when I heard a sound near the kitchen. A rattling. I realized it was the fire escape window. He was trying to climb up the back. I ducked down again and told the dispatcher. She said officers were arriving. About a minute later, I heard sirens and saw red and blue lights flashing outside. I stayed down. Soon I heard footsteps outside the building and then shouting. Cops yelling commands, doors slamming. It was chaotic for a bit, then everything got quiet again. A few minutes later, someone knocked. This time a controlled, steady knock. Police, they said. I opened the door slowly. 2 officers were there, one holding a flashlight, the other asking if I was okay. They said they found Jason on the fire escape, trying to get to my window. He had a folding knife in his pocket and gloves on. They handcuffed him and took him away. The next day, I got a call from a detective. He told me Jason admitted to following me home from the supermarket days ago. Said he saw me taking notes in my car and assumed I was the reason he got fired. His supervisor confirmed that my report led to a final write-up, and with his recent divorce and debt piling up, it was the breaking point. He'd been drinking more lately and told the cops he just snapped. They charged him with criminal threatening and attempted breaking and entering. The knife made it worse. They also issued a restraining order. Jason ended up serving 6 months in county jail. I never saw him again, but for months, I jumped whenever someone knocked on my door. I quit secret shopping after that. I couldn't keep doing it knowing how some people might react. It was just supposed to be extra cash, a side thing to get through the month. But it turned into something that could have gone really bad. Sometimes, earning a bit more just isn't worth the risk, especially when you're dealing with people who already feel like the world's against them. When I was 17, me and my friends thought we were hilarious pranksters. Every Friday night, we'd gather in Danny's basement with bags of chips and soda, scrolling through Craigslist on his dad's old laptop. The personals section was our favorite. We'd find the weirdest ads, people asking for all kinds of bizarre stuff. And we'd take turns calling the numbers using Danny's beat-up flip phone. His parents didn't check the minutes, and back then, we thought it made us invincible. We'd fake accents, pretend to be lonely truckers or flirty girls, and see how long we could keep the person on the line before they figured us out. Most people caught on quickly and just hung up. It was dumb, sure, but we were bored suburban kids. Nobody had jobs yet, and none of us were old enough to get into real trouble. Pranking strangers felt like some weird, safe rebellion. One time, I pretended to be a 50-year-old widow asking for companionship, and Danny laughed so hard he spilled Sprite on the carpet. We never recorded anything, never took screenshots. It was just stupid fun in the moment, something to talk about at school on Monday. Then that one night, we found this ad that stood out. It wasn't funny or bizarre, it was kind of gross. The guy had posted something like, "Discreet male, looking for special massage service. Generous tips for the right girl. Safe, clean, private. Text or call." He listed his number, and that was it. No picture, no name. We all stared at the screen for a second. Danny broke the silence by saying, "Yo, I bet this guy's a total creep." We agreed. Danny dialed the number and put on a soft, breathy voice. "Hi, is this the guy from Craigslist?" He called himself Katie. The man answered quickly, sounded older, maybe in his 40s, and way too eager. His voice was quiet, like he was whispering. "Yes. Are you free tonight?" Danny giggled and motioned for us to shut up. "I might be," he said. "What do you have in mind?" The guy started talking details. It got gross. Danny kept going, pretending to be shy, asking dumb questions. Then the man said something that made us all stop laughing. He gave an address. His actual home address. "You can come by around 9, back entrance. I'll leave the light on." He said it like it was totally normal. We all looked at each other. "He really gave it," I said. "That's insane." At first, we laughed about it. But then I got this idea. I said, "What if we went there? Like, just drove by? Or rang the bell? See who the creep is? Call him out or something?" Danny's eyes lit up. "Yeah, let's mess with him. Just show up and act like Katie." Josh was the only one who hesitated. "That's kinda messed up," he said. "What if he's dangerous?" I shrugged. "We're not going in or anything. Just ring and run. Or say something to freak him out." Danny backed me up. "It's just some old dude. He'll freak and slam the door, and we'll laugh about it all weekend." We loaded into Danny's car around 8:30. His mom's old Honda Civic. He'd gotten his license a few months back, and this was one of the few nights his parents let him take the car. There were 4 of us. Me, Danny, Josh, and Trevor. Trevor brought his GoPro. He wanted to record from the dash, said it'd be funny to rewatch later. It was already dark, and the streets were mostly empty. We followed the GPS to the address, which turned out to be in this quiet residential area, maybe 20 minutes from our town. The house was small, old-looking, one of those bungalows with a chain-link fence and overgrown bushes. A single porch light was on, flickering a little. We parked across the street, kept the engine running. "That's it," Danny said. "Look at that place. Total creeper vibe." We all stared at the house in silence for a bit. No cars in the driveway. No movement behind the windows. Then Trevor said, "I'll go. Ring the bell, say I'm Katie, and leave." Danny shook his head. "No, I should go. He talked to me." I didn't want to seem scared, so I said, "Let's all go. Just walk up, knock, say something, then leave. 2 minutes tops." We crossed the street together, slow and quiet. Josh kept looking behind us, like someone might see. There was a side gate, open just a crack. Danny pushed it, and it creaked loud as hell. The backyard was mostly dirt, a couple of dead plants, and a broken-down shed. At the back of the house was a wooden door with a small light above it. The light was on. "That's it," I whispered. He said the back door. Danny stepped up, knocked twice, soft but clear. We all stood behind him, half hidden by the shadows. After a few seconds, we heard footsteps. Then the door opened a crack, just a sliver. A voice came out. "Katie?" Quiet, cautious, definitely the same guy. Danny didn't speak right away. Then he said, "You the massage guy?" in the same fake voice. The man didn't respond. The door opened a little more. We could barely see his face, just part of it, the lower half. Stubble, thin lips. He looked older than we thought. "Come in," he said. None of us moved. Danny said, Can you step out here? I got questions." That's when the guy said, flatly, "You're not a girl." We froze. He didn't yell. Didn't sound angry. Just, "Sure." He started closing the door, slow and steady. Danny stepped forward like he wanted to say something, but the door clicked shut. We stood there, not saying anything, then turned and walked fast back to the car. No one ran, but we moved quick. Trevor said, Let's go, man. That was too weird. Danny was quiet. He started the engine, and we pulled away without headlights until we were a block out. Nobody said a word for a few minutes. Then Danny asked, "Did he know the whole time?" I didn't answer. I was looking out the back window, just in case anyone was following. We got back in the car and everyone was shaken, but I still had this weird urge to push things further. I said, "That was creepy, but we didn't really call him out. I want to see his face when he realizes it was just a prank." Danny hesitated but then nodded. "Let's go back. But this time, we do it right." Josh and Trevor weren't on board, but I insisted. "I'll do it. You guys stay in the car. Just keep the engine running." We circled around for about 10 minutes, made sure no one was following us, then pulled up a little down the block from the house. The porch light was still on, and everything looked quiet. I got out and walked toward the front door, trying to act casual. My heart was beating faster the closer I got. I didn't go to the back this time. I wanted to confront him directly, face to face. I rang the bell, waited. After about 10 seconds, the door opened. The same guy, same worn-out face looked at me through the screen. Before he could say anything, I started laughing. "Hey man, remember that call earlier? Yeah, that was us. We just wanted to see what kind of loser actually posts crap like that." I thought it'd be funny, thought it would freak him out. But his face didn't match what I expected. He looked more confused than anything. Then his expression shifted fast. Anger, like real anger. He opened the screen door. "How old are you?" he snapped. "Why the hell are you at my house?" He stepped out, still in socks, and got right in my face. "You think this is funny? You think you can show up here and harass me?" I kept the smug grin on, but it was getting harder. "Hey, chill. You're the one putting up gross ads online. We were just messing around." That didn't help. His jaw tightened, and without another word, he turned around and went back inside. I thought he was done, maybe embarrassed, maybe calling the cops. Instead, he came back out holding a rifle. A real one. Long, with a woodstock. I'd never seen a gun like that up close. He held it with both hands and raised it toward me. "You're trespassing," he shouted. "Get off my property." I froze. The street was dead quiet. No cars, no neighbors outside. Just me, this guy, and that rifle pointed at my chest. I raised my hands and started backing away, quick but not running. Okay, I'm leaving," I said. "It was a joke. Just a joke." He kept following. "You think it's a game? You think I won't defend myself?" His voice cracked on the last word, like he was barely holding it together. I was halfway down his driveway, trying not to trip. My friends were yelling from the car, waving at me to run. I heard the engine rev. I turned and sprinted the rest of the way, heard gravel crunching under his steps behind me. The rifle was still pointed straight at me. Trevor had the door open, and I dove in head first, slamming it shut just as Danny hit the gas. Tires screeched. We flew down the street, not even looking back until we hit the main road. I glanced through the back window and saw him still standing in the driveway, the rifle aimed at us until we were out of sight. Nobody spoke. No one laughed. Danny kept both hands tight on the wheel. We drove in silence for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. None of us texted or called. It felt like the whole night was some weird dream until I checked my email the next morning. There was a message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, just a short email that made my stomach drop. "I know your car. I have the plate number. I know where you go to school. You think you're funny? You think this is a game? I've got friends. You'll regret this." I sat there staring at the screen. It wasn't just threatening. It was specific. He knew things. I called Danny right away, told him about the email. He sounded half asleep, but when I read it to him, he went quiet. "Did you show the plate?" he asked. "I don't think so, but maybe." He followed me to the car. We told Trevor and Josh. Everyone was freaked. Danny wanted to go to the police, but we knew we'd get busted for harassment, maybe worse. We were just dumb kids, but we crossed a line. We kept thinking he'd show up at school, follow us home, tell our parents. Every time someone knocked at the door, I flinched. I started looking over my shoulder in the halls. Nothing happened that week, or the next. No more emails, no messages. But that tension didn't go away. We stayed quiet about it, stopped hanging out on Fridays. No more prank calls. Craigslist became something we didn't joke about anymore. Looking back, we got lucky. That guy could have shot me, could have tracked us down. Maybe he tried. Maybe he realized we were just kids and let it go. Or maybe he didn't want cops sniffing around either. I don't know. But that was the last prank we ever pulled. Some people online aren't just weird, they're dangerous. And when you mess with someone like that, even as a joke, the consequences are real. We thought we were just being funny. But that night, we learned fast how easy it is for a joke to turn into something serious. Something you don't walk away from. Last summer, I picked up a side job off Craigslist, like I've done 100 times before. I'm a carpenter, mostly framing and drywall, and I scan listings every Friday to fill my weekends. Some of them are duds, sure, but others pay surprisingly well. This one was somewhere in between. A guy named Harry reached out and said he wanted help converting a closet in his basement into a small workshop. He explained over the phone that he was starting a new hobby, wood carving or something, and needed the space set up to store his tools securely. He didn't sound totally normal, kind of stiff, like he was choosing his words too carefully. But he was polite and offered cash up front. Said it was a rush job and wanted it done within 2 days. That wasn't weird by itself. A lot of people don't want contractors in their house any longer than necessary. Since it was a bit of a squeeze working in a tight basement, and I wanted to finish faster, I brought my younger brother Tommy. He's been helping me for about a year now, learning the trade, and he's a hard worker. We loaded up my van with tools, plywood, hinges, and heavy-duty locks, since Harry said security was a priority. I asked him over text if he was worried about break-ins, and he just replied, "The contents will be valuable." Nothing else. Again, odd wording, but I've dealt with clients who were worse. We agreed to show up Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Harry's house was on the edge of town, newer development. One of those wide one-story homes with a deep backyard and a short gravel driveway. The yard was plain, just dry grass and a couple of bushes near the porch. The house itself looked clean but generic, like no one had lived in it long. When we pulled up, the blinds were all down and the curtains closed. I knocked, and Harry opened the door instantly, like he'd been standing right there. He was in his 40s, I'd guess. Bald, thin, wearing a tucked-in polo and khakis. He didn't shake hands, didn't smile. Just looked at us for a second before stepping aside and saying, "Downstairs, I'll show you." We followed him through the living room, which barely had any furniture, a couch, one table, no decorations, and into the basement. The stairs creaked a bit. The whole place smelled faintly like fresh paint and dry plaster, like it hadn't been lived in much yet. The basement was finished, at least mostly. Carpeted floor, painted walls, recessed lights in the ceiling. In the far corner, past a water heater and some storage bins, was the closet. It was small, maybe 6 by 8 feet. Low ceiling, no windows. "This is it," Harry said. "I want a reinforced door here, locks on both sides, but especially the inside. Strong frame, steel if you have it. The latch needs to hold firm. Think of it like a vault. I don't want anyone getting in or out without a key." That was the first time Tommy gave me a look. Reinforcing a closet from the inside didn't make much sense if you were worried about people breaking in. Still, the guy was paying cash and seemed serious. I asked him if he was storing something dangerous, like chemicals or firearms, and he said, "Just tools, but some of them are rare." That didn't explain why he needed someone locked inside. But we were there, and he'd already handed me a $300 deposit in an envelope. I told him we'd get started. As we unpacked tools and materials, Harry hovered. He stood just a few feet away while we measured the frame. He didn't make small talk, didn't offer coffee or ask questions about us. He just watched. Every time I drilled into the wood or tested a hinge, he leaned in like he was studying the mechanics. It wasn't nosy, exactly. It was intense. Like he cared more about the construction than most clients ever do. While I measured the top beam of the frame, he asked, "How much force would it take to break through this?" I paused. "Depends. With the reinforced frame and the locks we're installing, a lot. You'd need a sledgehammer, maybe a battering ram." He nodded, staring at the wood like he was picturing it being hit. "Would someone inside be able to push their way out?" I looked over at Tommy again. He was holding a level and had stopped mid-step. I said, "Not unless they're freakishly strong and the locks fail. We're building it solid." Harry smiled slightly. "Good." We worked for about 3 hours straight. Harry stayed the whole time, sometimes pacing near the door, other times just watching in silence. At one point, he stepped out briefly and came back with a thermos. I didn't see him drink from it. He just set it on the stairs and resumed watching. As I installed the inside lock mechanism, a heavy sliding bolt type, he asked if the hinges could be reversed in case of emergency. "Not easily," I told him. "It's built for one-way access. You sure you want it like this?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly like this." Tommy whispered to me while Harry stepped away again. "Dude, this is weird. Why lock from the inside?" I shrugged. "He's probably paranoid. Maybe had stuff stolen before." "Still," Tommy said, "feels off." I agreed. But the work was almost done, and the money was good. We finished installing the locks, tested the frame strength, and added a steel plate on the inside as requested. It was solid. Overkill for sure, but functional. Harry stood inside the closet as I showed him how the bolt worked from the interior. He asked me to shut the door with him inside, then open it after a minute. I did. He stood there in the middle of the small room, nodded once, and stepped out. "It's good. Finish the trim, and you're done." The next morning started strange and just got worse. We showed up around the same time, 9-ish, and Harry was already waiting at the top of the driveway. He waved us in, but he didn't say good morning or anything. He looked restless, kept glancing over his shoulder as we walked toward the house. Once we were inside, he handed us 2 brown paper bags with sandwiches and said, "Lunch, for later, on me." It was polite, sure, but it felt like he was trying too hard. We went downstairs to finish the trim and seal the frame edges. While I was sanding the inside edge of the door frame, I noticed Harry wasn't hovering anymore. Instead, he was pacing back and forth in the basement, muttering under his breath. At one point, I caught part of what he was saying. "Finally got help around here. Finally some hands I can count on." He didn't notice me listening, just kept walking back and forth with his hands behind his back. I tried to lighten the mood. I asked, So, what kind of projects are you planning to do in here anyway? He stopped walking but didn't look at me. I'm between things right now, he said. Looking to start something new? Takes the right people though. Most don't stick around. Most flake. You and your brother, you're different. That last part made me pause. The way he said it, like he'd already decided something about us, felt off. Tommy caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. We didn't say anything, but I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. This guy was getting stranger by the hour. A little later, I noticed Harry had added a new padlock on the outside of the closet door. One of those heavy-duty ones you see on storage units. I hadn't put that there. He must have done it after we left the night before. I pointed to it and asked, "You add this?" He nodded. Extra security. Can't be too careful. That was the moment things turned. I didn't know it yet, but I'd be locked behind that door before the hour was out. Tommy went up to grab a box of screws we'd left in the van. It was just me and Harry in the basement. I was crouched down, tightening the bottom hinge with a power driver, when I felt something hit me hard in the middle of my back. I stumbled forward, hit the door frame with my shoulder, and before I could turn around, Harry shoved me fully into the closet. I hit the floor on my side, twisted and reached for the door, but it slammed shut before I could grab it. I heard the click of the padlock snapping shut. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. "You're staying," Harry said from the other side. His voice was flat. "You're going to help me with some ongoing work. It's nothing personal. I just can't have you walking out like the others." I started banging on the door with both fists. "Let me out. Are you out of your mind?" Harry didn't answer directly. I heard him walking back and forth, still talking. Maybe to himself, maybe to me. I always do the hard part. Prep the space, get the supplies, arrange everything. But the help never lasts. They leave. They disappoint. Not this time. No. This time I've got what I need. I looked around the tiny closet. No tools, no vents, no way out. It was just solid walls, a reinforced door, and the bolts I'd installed myself. My hands hurt from slamming them into the door. I could hear my own breathing, and Harry's footsteps pacing the concrete outside. I screamed for Tommy until my throat hurt. Tommy came down maybe 5 minutes later. I heard his boots on the stairs, then his voice. "Hey? What's going on? Where are you?" I yelled back immediately. "He locked me in. Get me out." There was a pause. Then Harry's voice. "He got trapped. It was an accident. I was just about to unlock it." Tommy wasn't dumb. "Then why's there a padlock on it?" I heard a clinking sound. "This yours?" Harry started to say something, but then there was a thud. A single, hard hit. Then silence. The next sound I heard was metal scraping as the lock opened. The door swung open, and Tommy stood there, holding one of our framing hammers. Harry was lying a few feet away on his side, not moving. His head was bleeding. "We're leaving," Tommy said. He didn't even look at Harry. We grabbed our tools and ran up the stairs. I didn't care about the rest of the money. I just wanted out. We drove straight to a gas station a few blocks away and called the cops. They went in and found more than we expected. In Harry's bedroom, they found a stun gun, handcuffs, duct tape, and a notebook with times and dates. My name and Tommy's were written inside, along with weird notes like trust level, high, and compliance, likely. According to the cops, he'd probably been planning to trap someone for a while. Maybe more than just trap. He was taken away in an ambulance. We didn't go back for the rest of our stuff. I gave a statement and left it at that. Since then, I don't take Craigslist jobs unless I can verify everything. I don't go into strangers' houses alone, and I always have an exit plan. There's people out there looking for more than help with construction. Some of them are looking for someone to keep. When I was 22, I worked as a freelance delivery driver, mostly picking up Craigslist gigs to make ends meet. Rent wasn't cheap, and I didn't want a roommate, so I took whatever jobs I could find. One of the easiest and most reliable ones came from this older guy named Mr. Wilson. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, he'd email me a grocery list. I'd pick up everything from the local supermarket and drive it over to his place, which was tucked deep into this quiet residential neighborhood with those tall hedges and silent streets. Always the same time, same list, same routine. He paid me through Venmo, and on top of the standard $50 delivery fee, he tipped me $150. Every single time. No questions, no bargaining. It was more than generous, and I wasn't about to ask why. At first, I thought maybe he just liked the convenience and didn't care about the money. He looked about 70-something, frail but well-kept, always in slacks and a sweater even during summer. House was clean but plain. Living room had a dusty upright piano, stacks of old National Geographics, and one of those vintage clocks that tick loud. We didn't talk much. I'd ring the doorbell, he'd peek through the curtain, open the door, and I'd set the groceries on the small table just inside the doorway. "Thank you," he'd say, then close the door quietly behind me. No small talk, no chit-chat, but always polite, never rude. For the first month or so, nothing felt out of the ordinary. He just seemed like a retired guy who didn't like leaving his house. Some people are like that, especially older folks. He never had visitors, no one else's car in the driveway, and the curtains were always drawn. I didn't think much of it, just figured he liked his privacy. But around the 4th or 5th month, I started noticing small things. At first, it was little stuff. He'd glance over my shoulder more than usual when I stood at the door. Once, I saw him peeking through the blinds as I walked up the driveway. When I got to the door, he acted normal again. Still polite, still quiet, but there was something different. Subtle tension. A few weeks later, he asked me, "Did you notice anyone following you today?" I paused, kind of thrown off. I told him no, not that I saw. He nodded, not saying anything else, and handed me the cash tip that week instead of doing it through Venmo. From that point on, he kept switching between cash and Venmo randomly. No explanation. Just whatever he felt like that day. I started getting the feeling he didn't trust something, or someone. He'd open the door slower, keeping the chain lock on until he saw it was me. I wasn't wearing anything sketchy, just jeans and a plain hoodie, but he still took longer to open up. One Wednesday, I got there 5 minutes earlier than usual, and I caught a glimpse of him through the window standing dead still with a cane in one hand, peeking through the corner of the blinds like he expected someone to be out there. He looked thinner, more restless. He used to just thank me and close the door. Now, he'd glance around before shutting it, always looking past me like something might be out on the street. I once asked him if he was okay, but he just nodded. "Don't linger in the driveway," he said quickly, then closed the door. From then on, every delivery felt like walking into a setup. Not a trap, but like I was interrupting someone who was on edge all the time. He'd start triple-checking the locks the moment I left. I could hear him flipping the deadbolts and sliding some kind of bar across the door. One time, I forgot to give him the receipt, so I knocked again right after he shut the door. He didn't open it, just said, "Leave it under the mat." He kept his walking cane near him at all times. I noticed he even leaned it against the door while I unloaded the groceries. It was like he expected something to happen, like he thought someone might try to rush in. I didn't know what to make of it. I tried to convince myself it was just age catching up with him, maybe some paranoia. Maybe he saw some crime report on TV and it stuck in his mind. Then he started asking questions. More than just the usual, "Anyone follow you?" He asked if I'd seen any strange cars on the street, if I noticed any new people moving into the neighborhood, if anyone asked me about him. I always said no, and it was the truth. No one had. No one ever mentioned him. I never even saw his neighbors come or go. The whole street felt quiet like a cemetery every time I pulled up. On what turned out to be the last delivery I ever made to him, he seemed worse. He looked like he hadn't slept. Bags under his eyes, hand trembling a little when he reached for the receipt. He didn't say thanks this time, just whispered, "They're watching now," and closed the door. As I walked back to my car, I heard all 3 locks click into place behind me. On that final delivery, I pulled into Mr. Wilson's driveway around the usual time. But before I even reached the front step, I noticed him moving through the house behind the windows. He looked frantic. Not in a loud way, just constant motion. He pulled the curtain aside from one window, held it for a few seconds, then moved to the next room and did the same thing. I stood there holding 2 bags of groceries, unsure if I should knock or just wait. After about 20 seconds, he opened the door abruptly without waiting for me to ring. He looked rough. Dark circles under his eyes, same sweater from last week, collar a little stained like it hadn't been washed in a while. He didn't say hello, just stepped aside to let me in like always. But he was already halfway across the living room before I even set the bags down. He moved to the far window and squinted through the blinds, muttering something under his breath. I could only make out the words, "running out of time." He didn't seem to care that I was there. I asked if he wanted me to put the cold stuff in the fridge like usual. He shook his head quickly and waved his hand. "No, just leave it. It's fine," he said. Then he looked at me directly. "Did you notice any unfamiliar cars on the street? Any vans?" I looked out the window. Same quiet street. No cars parked outside. No movement. "No," I told him. "Nothing weird. Just your neighbor's usual cars." He seemed to breathe out, like that answer gave him a moment of peace. But it passed quick. He looked back through the blinds again. "Okay," he said. "Okay." I grabbed my receipt pad and handed it to him to sign, but he didn't take it. He looked at me, still holding the curtain back with one hand. "You're a good kid," he said. "Always showed respect. Never asked questions. That's rare." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He looked past me toward the door. "You should go. Be careful." That was the last time I saw him in that house. The following Wednesday, I picked up his order like normal. I'd already memorized the list by then. Same items every week, same brands. I even parked in the same grocery lot space I always used. Nothing felt different until I got to his street. 2 cop cars were parked at the entrance, lights flashing but no sirens. Another one was in front of his house, and yellow tape crisscrossed the front yard. I slowed down, then pulled over across the street when I saw a small crowd of neighbors standing on their lawns. Some people were whispering, pointing, others just watching. Then I saw them bring him out. 2 officers led Mr. Wilson, hands cuffed behind his back, down the front steps. His face looked blank. Not sad, not scared, just empty. He didn't resist or speak. They put him into the back of the patrol car slowly, like he wasn't in a rush. Before they closed the door, he turned his head and looked directly at me. There was no sign of recognition. He looked through me like I wasn't there. I didn't move. Just stood next to my car holding a paper grocery bag. An officer approached me, asked me to step away from the area. I explained I was delivering his groceries like I did every week. He looked me over, then asked for my name and number. Said I might be a witness. I gave him everything, and asked what was going on. "All I can say is this is part of an ongoing investigation," he said. "You won't be delivering here again." I stood there for another few seconds, watching as more cops entered the house. One of them carried out a small box of what looked like files. Another walked out with what I swear was an old hard drive in an evidence bag. I got back in my car and left. I drove a few blocks before pulling over again. I just sat there. The groceries were in the passenger seat. A couple things needed refrigeration, but I didn't care. I ended up dumping the whole bag in a trash bin behind a pharmacy. I didn't want to take it home. Over the next few days, I tried to find out what happened. I checked local news sites. Nothing. No mention of an arrest on that street. No incident reports. I looked for court records under Wilson. Nothing matched. It didn't make sense. I went back to the street a few days later, just walked around pretending to be out for a stroll. I asked a couple neighbors what happened. Most of them said they didn't know. One lady said she heard it had to do with something serious, but she didn't have details. "Feds were involved," she whispered. That was the only hint I got. I kept checking online for weeks. Still nothing. No mugshot, no charges, not even a mention on social media. I figured maybe he gave me a fake name. Wouldn't be hard, especially if he paid in cash sometimes. A month later, I got one phone call from a detective. He confirmed I was the one delivering groceries to Mr. Wilson, asked a few questions about our conversations, what I saw in the house, how he acted. I answered everything, but when I asked what the charges were, the detective just said, "I'm not at liberty to disclose that." That was the last I heard from anyone. Sometimes I wonder if he was in witness protection, or maybe hiding from something bigger. Maybe he did something terrible a long time ago and thought it had finally caught up to him. I don't know. All I know is that I was stepping into that house every week like it was nothing, not knowing who I was really dealing with. Makes you think twice about picking up random Craigslist gigs. When I was 19, I was desperately looking for a side job to help pay for college. Rent was tight, and the hours at my part-time cafe gig had been cut down. I spent almost an entire week scrolling through Craigslist, replying to any post that didn't scream scam in the title. Most were shady or just unpaid internships. Then I saw it. Weekend babysitter needed. $25 HR. 2 kids, easy job. The post was clean, with no typos, and included a friendly tone. The woman, Cindy, responded to my email within a few hours. She said she and her husband liked to go out on weekend evenings, and they needed someone to watch their 8 and 10-year-old boys from around 5 p.m. to midnight. She wrote that they were well-behaved, just need dinner and bedtime. It seemed ideal. We exchanged maybe 5 emails. She asked basic questions, like if I had babysat before, if I was CPR certified, I was, and if I had a way to get to their place outside town. Nothing felt weird. She ended by saying she wanted me to meet the kids first before hiring me, and asked if I could swing by their place that Saturday afternoon. The address was about a 25-minute drive out, but I said sure. It still felt pretty normal, and honestly, I was just excited about the pay. Saturday rolled around, and I drove out there. The house was at the end of a long, cracked road, not exactly rural, but definitely isolated. It sat a bit back from the road, with a gravel driveway and no sidewalk. The house itself was small, 1-story, with faded yellow siding and peeling white trim. Weeds had taken over most of the front yard, and one of the shutters hung loose. I paused for a second before getting out of the car. It looked way rougher than I imagined, but I figured maybe they just hadn't maintained the outside. Rich people can be weird about priorities. I rang the bell. After about 10 seconds, a man opened the door. Mid-40s, graying hair, patchy beard. He was wearing a stretched-out t-shirt with some old band logo and cargo shorts. His eyes looked tired. "Hey," he said, scratching his head. "You must be the sitter girl. Cindy took the boys to the park. Said she'd be back soon. Come in." He didn't say his name. I hesitated, but then stepped inside. The living room was dim even though it was daytime. Blinds were half drawn, one of them broken and bent inward. It smelled like old pizza and something else, maybe damp carpet or mildew. The couch cushions were slumped in, and a pile of unfolded laundry sat on the armrest. There were at least 4 pizza boxes on the coffee table and a few empty beer cans. A crumpled takeout bag on the floor. "Want a soda?" he asked, already walking toward the kitchen. I followed slowly, not really sure where to sit. There wasn't a clean surface anywhere. I ended up perching on the arm of a chair that looked less grimy than the rest. He came back with a can of Dr. Pepper, which I accepted but didn't open. "So Cindy said you're in college or something?" he asked, lowering himself onto the couch with a grunt. "Good. You look normal. The last girl she interviewed was all weird." "Yeah," I said. "I go to community college, just trying to pick up a few hours on weekends." He nodded slowly. "Cool. Yeah, the kids are easy. Hyper, but good boys. You just make sure they eat and get to bed. That's it." I smiled politely, still clutching the unopened can. There were no photos of kids in the living room. Actually, no photos at all, just some dusty knickknacks and a dead plant in the corner. "How old did she say they were again?" I asked. He scratched his beard. 8 and 10, I think. Or close. You'll see when they get back." I thought it was strange he didn't seem to know for sure, but I nodded. Maybe he just wasn't the hands-on type. A few minutes passed in silence. He flipped on the TV to some sports channel but kept the volume low. I sat there trying not to fidget, the soda now slightly warm in my hand. I checked the time on my phone. It had been about 15 minutes since I got there. "You said they went to the park?" I asked. "Yeah, the one a couple blocks down. Cindy takes him there sometimes to get him tired out before sitting. Smart, huh?" I nodded again. That makes sense. Another 10 minutes passed. I kept glancing toward the window, hoping to see a car pulling up, or maybe some kids running to the door. Nothing. I stood. "Hey, maybe I should just come back later when they're back. I don't want to intrude or anything." He looked at me, then shook his head. "Nah, it's fine. They should be back soon. She said she wanted you to be here. You're not intruding." I sat back down, but felt the tension in my shoulders. I scanned the room again, more carefully this time. The wall clock wasn't working, stuck at 12:19. One of the kitchen chairs had duct tape around the leg. I could hear the faint buzz of a fly somewhere behind me. I finally opened the soda, more to do something with my hands than because I wanted it. It was flat. "I'll text her," I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the last message thread with Cindy and sent, "Hey, I'm here at the house. Just checking in. How far are you guys?" No response. He noticed. She probably left her phone in the car, or it died. She does that a lot. I nodded slowly. 5 more minutes. I glanced down the hall that led to the back rooms. Doors closed, the hallway dark. I tried to hide how often I checked the time, but it had now been over 30 minutes since I arrived. The sun was getting lower, and the dimness of the living room started to feel heavier. "I might just give it another 5 minutes," I said casually. He didn't answer. That's when he stood up, walked toward the kitchen again, and disappeared around the corner. I heard the fridge open, then close. A moment later, a drawer opened. Not loud, but enough that it caught my attention. The sound of something metallic sliding. I stood up quietly and stepped toward the front door. I kept my movements slow. I picked up my bag from the floor without making noise. I didn't hear him come back. I turned the doorknob carefully, trying not to make it click. Then I heard his voice from behind me. "Where you going?" I froze for a second. His voice wasn't loud, but it had dropped any friendliness. I turned halfway and forced a small laugh. "Just thought I'd check if I locked my car. Forgot to earlier." I kept one hand on the doorframe, feeling the rough, peeling paint beneath my fingers. He stepped closer, holding a beer can now, the tab still closed. "You sure? Looked like you were trying to leave." He was still trying to act casual, but his shoulders were tense, jaw tight. I mumbled something about not wanting to get a ticket for parking weird, then slowly backed into the room again. "Okay. Well, since she's still not back, maybe you could show me the kids' playroom, just so I know what toys they like and stuff." I forced a tight smile. He nodded slowly, suspicious for a beat, then turned down the hall. The hallway was dimmer than the living room. A single light bulb buzzed overhead. I followed behind, the air getting heavier with each step. There was a sharp chemical smell, bleach, but something else under it. Something bitter and wrong. The walls were bare, a few scuff marks, no pictures, no kids' drawings. Just empty frames with dusty glass. He stopped at the last door on the left and opened it. "Here it is," he said flatly. I stepped in and immediately felt the change. The room was cold, maybe from the window left open a crack. But what stopped me was how empty it was. No toys, no furniture, no books, just plastic sheeting covering most of the floor. Nothing else. My brain struggled to catch up with what I was seeing. The walls were bare. The closet door had no knob. A long strip of duct tape hung loose from the edge of the window. My feet stayed planted, but every part of me was telling me to move. "Where are the toys?" I asked. He shrugged. "They clean up. Neat kids." I didn't respond. I stepped back toward the door, but he stayed in the hallway, arms crossed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Actually, I need to use the bathroom. Can I—" "There's only one," he interrupted. "It's back there." He pointed behind me, toward a closed door inside the same room. I looked at it. No bathroom signs, no sound of plumbing behind it. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I think I left my charger in my car. Just gonna grab it real quick." He moved to block me. "You don't need it right now." Something in his face had changed. Less annoyed now, more focused. Eyes narrowed, hands twitching at his sides. I turned my body sideways, trying to slip past him. "I'll just be a sec." "You're acting nervous," he said. I kept my eyes on the floor and pushed past, forcing a laugh. "Just caffeine. I get jumpy." I made it to the hallway and picked up speed, heading toward the living room. I heard his footsteps behind me, slow but following. At the door, I reached out and tried the knob again. It didn't budge. I felt the top of the handle. Deadbolt. Locked from the inside. I spun around and he was there, standing less than 2 feet away. His breath was shallow, his pupils wide. "You're not supposed to open that," he said quietly. "I think I should go," I said. He didn't move. I turned and threw the deadbolt, yanked the door. It stuck for a second, then popped open with a creak. I got 1 foot outside before he grabbed my arm. "Hey! You don't just leave like that!" he shouted. I screamed, loud and sharp, twisting my arm hard. I heard fabric tear. He tried to grab me again, but I was already sprinting. My shoe came off halfway down the porch, but I didn't stop. I hit the gravel driveway and ran straight to my car, fumbling my keys. Behind me, I heard him yelling, "You're being rude! Come back! Cindy's on her way!" I got the door open, slammed it shut, locked it, and started the engine. He stepped into the driveway, still shouting, but didn't follow further. I reversed too fast, tires kicking up gravel, and sped down the road, not stopping until I hit the main highway. My hands were shaking as I drove, but I didn't stop. I didn't cry either. Not yet. I went straight to the police station. Walked in with my face still flushed, heart still racing. Told them everything. About the Craigslist post, the emails, the man, the house. Gave them the address, even showed them the messages on my phone. An officer took notes and nodded slowly as I described the empty room with the plastic sheet. "We've had similar reports," he said finally. "Different names, different emails, always the same kind of setup. Fake job posts, mostly babysitting or caretaking gigs. The people don't usually report it in time. You were smart to get out." They dispatched a unit to the house, but later called me to say the place was empty when they arrived. No sign of kids. No sign of anyone, really. The house had been rented under a fake name, and the owner couldn't be reached. The email account for Cindy was gone, deleted. The phone number? Disconnected. I never heard anything more. They said they'd follow up, but I didn't expect much. I was lucky. I knew that. Some people don't get that kind of warning before things go bad. Now, I only look for jobs through official channels. I meet people in public places. I Google their names, check LinkedIn, even ask for references. I don't care if it's just a babysitting job. That $25 an hour rate should have been a red flag. Nobody pays that much for no reason. I still think about that room sometimes. That bleach smell, the taped window, the locked door at the back. And I think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked out when I did. So, when I was 28 and between jobs, I spent most of my time scrolling Craigslist for any kind of short-term work. Nothing too sketchy, I told myself. I'd been burned before, once by a guy who promised a consulting gig that turned out to be selling knockoff perfumes door to door. And another time I ended up moving furniture for 12 hours straight with no breaks and only got paid $20. After that, I made myself a checklist. Only answer ads that had specific details, never give out too much personal info, and always meet in a public place first. I stuck to that pretty strictly for months. But by October, my savings were nearly gone, and my rent was due in 2 weeks. I started taking more risks. That's when I saw this post. It just said, discreet work, good pay, short term, and was signed Bella. No company name, no photos, no job title. Normally, I'd skip right past. But she included an email, and the message sounded more human than most. I figured it couldn't hurt to ask. I wrote back saying I'd need to meet in public first and asked for more details. She replied in less than an hour, very polite, said she understood my concerns, and suggested a coffee shop downtown that afternoon. She said the job was for helping her elderly uncle organize his antique collection, and it would pay $150 a day, cash. That was more than I'd made in any single day that whole month. We met at a busy spot right off Main Street. She stood out immediately. Mid-20s, clean clothes, soft voice, professional manner. Nothing about her screamed danger or weirdness. She introduced herself, Bella, and explained her uncle had been a military man and a serious collector of historical weapons. Apparently, he had dozens of old rifles, sabers, even some uniforms, just stored in boxes all over his house. She said he needed someone to help clean, catalog, and organize them. He was older, retired, and had trouble with his memory, so she was handling things for him. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. The stuff looked real. Some items were rusted or dusty, but most were displayed on racks or lined up in open drawers. Old bayonets, wooden rifle stocks, medals. I asked if there were any legal issues with handling that kind of stuff. She laughed and said no, most were deactivated or replicas, and the valuable ones were registered. I didn't get the feeling she was lying. She even told me the job wasn't physically demanding. He just needed help sorting through things and entering info on a spreadsheet. I asked why she didn't just hire someone through a service or moving company. She said her uncle didn't trust strangers and wanted someone he could interview himself. He's picky, she said, but he's harmless. She offered to drive me to the house that same day, said her uncle was home and could meet me right away. I hesitated. Normally I wouldn't go straight to someone's home, not on day one. But it was sunny, middle of the day, and she was already showing a level of transparency I hadn't seen in a while. And to be honest, I needed the money. Bad. So I said okay, as long as I could follow in my own car. She smiled, said that was totally fine. Her car was a blue Honda Civic, license plate clean and easy to read. She drove calm, no speeding, no sudden turns. We went about 20 minutes north, to a residential area just outside the city. The houses got older the further we drove, and more spaced out. Fewer sidewalks, lots of large oak trees, cracked driveways, mailboxes leaning to one side. Not run down exactly, just aged. The kind of neighborhood where people don't move often. We turned onto a narrow, quiet street and pulled into a long gravel driveway. The house at the end was a single-story ranch, pale yellow with dark green shutters, and a small American flag stuck in the garden. Looked like it hadn't been painted in a decade. 2 cars were parked out front, an old Ford pickup and what looked like a Buick from the late 90s. Bella got out first and waved me toward the porch. I parked and joined her. There was a screen door, a faded welcome mat, and a wind chime that clinked every few seconds. She knocked 3 times, then opened the door without waiting. "Uncle Ray? It's me. I brought the guy I told you about." No answer. We stepped inside. It smelled like mothballs and old books. The living room was dark, curtains mostly drawn, lined with dusty shelves and framed war photos. An old TV sat on a low wooden stand, screen turned off. The carpet was a worn brown pattern, probably from the 70s. She motioned me forward, whispering, "He might be napping." She led me down a short hallway to a back room. The door was open and the lights were off. Inside, I saw boxes stacked against the walls, and what looked like wooden crates with markings on them. There were a few display cases pushed to the side, some open. Bella flipped the switch. The room lit up dimly. "This is the main room," she said. "We'll start in here." I stepped in, looking around. The crates had labels like Mauser 1898 and WWI artifacts. Most were closed, a few partially open, showing sawdust and cloth wrappings. I bent down to peek into one of the cases. Inside was a long, curved sword with a black handle. Looked ceremonial. "Impressive," I said, standing up. She was behind me, phone in hand, texting someone. "He'll be down soon," she said. "Probably just took a nap in his chair again." She gestured to a chair in the corner. Old recliner, a blanket tossed over the back. I asked if I should start unpacking anything. She shook her head. "Let's wait till he says okay. He gets particular about what you touch first." She walked over to the window and adjusted the curtain just a bit, letting in some light. I heard a creak from the hallway. She glanced at me. "That's probably him now." The house was massive. sitting at the end of a curved driveway in a neighborhood that screamed old money. 2 stone lions guarded the entrance. The lawn was perfectly cut, and there were cameras at every corner of the house. I remember thinking, who needs help cleaning antiques in a place like this? Bella parked on the side, got out without a word, and motioned for me to follow. She unlocked the front door and led me into a cool, dim entryway. Hardwood floors, chandelier, clean air that smelled faintly of lemon polish. We passed through a formal living room filled with expensive-looking furniture and an actual grand piano, then into a den where the walls were covered in glass display cases. Inside were neatly arranged medals, badges, bayonets, and old photos in frames. It was a collection someone had spent decades building. Bella pointed to a hallway. "The sword room's back there. He wants you to start with those." She was calm, but she kept glancing at her phone, typing short messages and locking it quickly. "Your uncle up?" I asked. "He's resting. He'll come down when he's ready," she said. Her tone was clipped, distracted. I figured maybe she was just tense about having a stranger in the house. I shrugged it off and followed her down the hall. We reached a solid wood door near the end of the hallway. She opened it slowly, revealing a room lit by track lights mounted on the ceiling. Rows of mounted swords lined the walls, some on velvet backdrops, others in glass cases. Most had tags with little labels: Austrian Cavalry, 1859, or Union Officer's Saber, 1863. I was impressed, honestly. It looked more like a small museum than someone's home. "There's gloves on the table. Use those," Bella said. Then she stepped back into the hallway. I heard the soft beep of her phone again as I picked up a saber with a brass hilt. The silence in the house started to get to me. Big houses are always quiet, but this felt different. Too still. I didn't hear a TV, no footsteps upstairs, not even plumbing noises. Just the low hum of the track lights. I focused on the tags, trying to mentally catalog what I saw. Some of the blades had spots of rust, others were polished to a mirror shine. The craftsmanship was incredible. I'd been at it maybe 10 minutes when the front door slammed shut with a loud thud. It wasn't wind or a random noise. It was deliberate. I froze, holding a cavalry saber halfway out of its sheath. Then Bella appeared in the doorway again. This time she didn't look distracted. She looked cold. Her arms were at her sides, her eyes fixed straight at me. No smile. "What was that?" I asked, setting the saber down slowly. She didn't answer, just stepped fully into the room and moved in front of the doorway. Her face was blank now, and she wasn't trying to hide her tension. Behind her, a man stepped in. Big, easily 6 feet, heavy set with a shaved head and black hoodie. He didn't speak either. "That your uncle?" I said, already backing up. He didn't respond. Instead, he rushed me. I barely got my arms up before he grabbed me by the shoulders and drove me into the wall. My head knocked into a wooden frame. I shouted, tried to push him off, but he twisted me around and slammed me to the floor face down. My arms were pinned before I could get any leverage. Bella moved fast. She pulled rope from behind the door. They'd prepared. She yanked my wrists behind my back and started tying them tight. I kicked, tried to roll, but the guy pressed his knee into my back hard. "You're not going to be hurt," Bella said, voice sharp. "Just don't do anything stupid." They checked my pockets, took my wallet, my phone, my car keys. I could hear them talking quietly, moving fast. Bella asked the guy if the truck was ready. He said, "Yeah, out back." I hadn't even noticed there was a side gate or another vehicle nearby. For the next hour, they moved around the house grabbing things. Not just the swords, but medals, framed photos, anything that looked valuable. I could hear drawers opening, glass cases closing. The guy carried stuff out, while Bella packed items in plastic containers. They didn't say much. It was all very methodical, like they'd done this before. At some point, Bella came back into the room to check if I was still tied up. She didn't look at me, just scanned the walls to make sure nothing was left behind. I stayed quiet. My arms were going numb. Every so often I'd hear my car's trunk slam shut, then more footsteps. Eventually, the noise stopped. Just silence again. I laid there, face against the carpet, staring at the baseboard. 10 minutes later, she came back alone. She had a knife in her hand, which she used to cut the ropes on my wrists. I didn't move. "Don't call anyone for 2 hours," she said flatly. "We'll know if you do, and we'll come back. Understand?" I didn't answer. She didn't wait, just turned and walked out. I heard the front door open and close, then an engine start, then nothing. I sat up slowly, hands shaking from the loss of circulation. Got to my feet and looked around. Most of the swords were gone. The display cases were empty. I stumbled into the hallway, then to the den. Everything had been stripped. They were fast. Professional. I found the house phone in the kitchen and dialed 911. Tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what happened. Cops showed up maybe 15 minutes later. Took photos, asked questions, dusted for prints. They confirmed the house belonged to a Raymond H. Carlisle, retired Army, 72 years old, currently renting a winter property in Arizona. His niece Bella had permission to stay there. But that's where things unraveled. Her real name wasn't Bella. It was one of several aliases. The Craigslist account she used was tied to a throwaway email. No fingerprints in the house matched anyone on record. My car was found the next day, abandoned in a strip mall parking lot 20 miles out, windows smashed. Everything valuable was gone. They even took my phone's SIM card. A detective told me I was lucky. Said I was probably the third or fourth person she'd lured with fake jobs. No one had been seriously hurt yet, but he figured it was just a matter of time. Said they'd probably sell the antiques through private collectors, no questions asked. They never caught her. Never found the guy either. To this day, I still check Craigslist, but I don't answer anything vague. Not ever again. When I was 16, I was working at a burger joint for minimum wage and hating every minute of it. The place smelled like grease all the time. My uniform was always stained no matter how often I washed it. And the manager, Tony, was one of those guys who acted like the job was life or death. I was getting paid barely enough to cover my phone bill and snacks, and every shift felt like a slow crawl toward nowhere. I started checking Craigslist when I got home one night, greasy and pissed off after a double. Just typed in cash jobs and started scrolling. Most of the posts were scams or weird. But then one caught my eye. Abandoned property cleaning, $15, HR, cash paid at end of job. Sounded shady at first, but I clicked. The guy, Rick, said he was a private buyer who purchased foreclosed homes and needed them cleaned before renovation. He listed tasks like removing debris, wiping down walls, and sweeping floors. No biohazards, no weird chemicals. It sounded better than flipping patties. He signed off with his name and a phone number. I texted him right away. He replied fast. Said he was professional, paid cash at the end of every shift, and usually worked weekends. He asked my age, and when I told him I was 16, he didn't seem to care. "As long as you show up and work," he wrote. We exchanged a few more texts, and he sent me an address to meet him that coming Saturday. I felt a bit nervous, but the money sounded too good to ignore. It was almost double what I was making. Saturday morning came, and I told my mom I was doing yard work for someone from Craigslist. She didn't ask too many questions. I threw on old jeans and a hoodie, stuffed gloves and a bottle of water in my backpack, and biked to the address Rick gave me. It was a 2-story house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. The lawn was overgrown, and there were boards over one of the downstairs windows. No cars in the driveway except for a beat-up white pickup truck with paint buckets in the back. Rick was already there, leaning against the truck, smoking. He waved when he saw me. "You must be the kid," he said. He was probably in his 50s, skinny, pale skin like he hadn't seen sun in months, and his teeth looked bad, like gray-brown bad. But he spoke normal, calm, not friendly, not unfriendly, just normal. Said his last worker flaked, and he needed someone reliable. He unlocked the front door and showed me inside. The place smelled stale, like dust and old carpet. The living room had some garbage, old newspapers, and broken blinds hanging from one window. "I mostly need you in the basement," he said. "There's some crap down there from the last owners. Just bag it up. You'll be here alone, but I'm nearby if anything happens." He said he'd drop off some cleaning supplies in a bit. We went down together so he could show me what he meant. The stairs creaked badly, and there was no light. He used a small flashlight and handed me a second one. "Power's off," he muttered. "Don't trip." The basement was unfinished, cement floor, stone walls, and wood beams across the ceiling. There were some broken shelves, stacks of old cardboard boxes, and a pile of what looked like old clothes in the corner. A metal folding chair was tipped over near the far wall. The air felt heavy down there. Still. He pointed at the mess. "That's the worst of it. Just get it bagged up and haul it to the garage. I'll swing back in an hour or two." He turned and went back up the stairs, boots thumping as he walked. I waited until I heard the front door shut before I moved. I started with the boxes. Most were empty or filled with junk, mildewed paper, broken kitchen stuff, even a VHS tape. I kept glancing toward the stairs, half expecting Rick to come back down, but he didn't. After maybe 20 minutes, I moved to the pile of clothes. I used gloves like he said, but they were still gross, damp, like they had been wet recently. Underneath the clothes, I found a duffel bag. It was half unzipped, and I could see it was filled with more clothes, but these were folded neatly. That was weird. Everything else in the basement was just trash. Why would someone stash clean, folded clothes under a pile of soaked junk? I pulled it open a little more. There were a couple of shirts, a hoodie, and what looked like a school backpack stuffed inside. I didn't open the backpack. I just shoved the bag to the side and kept going. That was the first time I really felt like something was off. I was halfway through dragging a trash bag up the stairs when I noticed something else strange. The garage was locked. Not just locked, but padlocked from the outside. I tried the door twice. First gentle, then harder. Solid. I hadn't noticed that when we came in. I set the bag down in the hallway and checked the front door. Also locked. It clicked when I tried the knob. I looked out the window, but Rick's truck was gone. I stood there a second, holding the flashlight. I went back to the basement. Still had 2 more trash bags to fill. The last pile was mostly broken furniture. Wooden slats, busted chair legs, a mattress that looked like something had chewed on it. I was leaning over to lift part of the frame when I heard it. A soft metallic sound, like something brushing against pipes. Not a bang. Not loud. Just enough to make me stop moving. I froze. Waited. Nothing. I turned off the flashlight and stood there, letting my eyes adjust. The small glass window near the top of the basement wall let in a bit of gray light, enough to see outlines. Then another sound, this one sharper, A quick clink, like metal on metal. I aimed my flashlight toward the noise, heart thudding. There was nothing there, just the far wall, the old tipped-over chair, and that duffel bag. I walked toward it slowly, light shaking in my hand. I crouched and tilted the bag again, looking underneath it. That's when I saw it. Scrape marks. Fresh ones. Like the bag had been dragged recently, over the cement. I stood up and backed away. My boot hit something. I turned fast. Just a broomstick. But behind it was a door. I hadn't seen it before because it blended into the wall. It was low, maybe 5 feet high, and looked like a storage hatch or something. I reached for the handle, but it didn't budge. Locked from the other side. As I turned away, I heard the front door open upstairs. Heavy steps crossed the floor above me. Then stopped. I spent about an hour sweeping and wiping down surfaces in the basement. It was cold, smelled like mildew, and the dust made my nose itch constantly. Rick came down a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4, and each time he stayed longer than before. At first, he just stood there, arms crossed, watching me silently as I worked. No talking, no instructions, just watching. The way his eyes followed my movements made my skin prickle. He always stood too close, closer than normal. His breathing was the worst part. Heavy, wet, like he had a cold or something, and it echoed in the stillness of the basement. After a while, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I said, "Hey, I'm getting kind of thirsty. Can I take a quick break?" Rick smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "I'll grab you something," he said. "You stay and keep working." I hesitated, but nodded. He went back up the stairs, and I listened to his boots thump across the floor until the front door creaked open. He came back 5 minutes later with a bottle of water, handed it to me without a word, and just stood there again, watching me drink. Then he started asking questions. How old I was again, if I had a girlfriend, if I worked out. "You look strong for 16, he said. "You play sports?" I muttered something about playing basketball at school, hoping he'd get bored and leave. He didn't. He just kept standing there, staring, until I picked up the broom and started sweeping again. I turned my back to him and tried to focus on the sound of the broom over the concrete. A minute later, I heard him walk back upstairs. It wasn't even noon yet, and I was already counting the minutes until I could leave. The whole basement felt wrong, like the air was thicker than it should have been. My flashlight flickered now and then. I kept checking behind me every few minutes. When Rick came down again, it was different. He had something in his hand. A bigger flashlight. One of those heavy ones you see in hardware stores. He waved it at the far end of the basement. "There's another room back there," he said. "Behind that door. It needs some work, too. Probably full of cobwebs and junk." I didn't answer. He stepped closer, held the flashlight out toward me. "Tell you what," he added. "I'll give you an extra 20 if you clean it up. Just use this light. The regular power's messed up in that part of the house." I stared at the door he pointed to. The same one I'd found earlier, low and small, with the scrape marks in front of it. "I don't think I should," I said. "My mom just texted me. Family thing. I gotta head out soon." That wasn't true. My phone was in airplane mode, but I wasn't about to follow him into some pitch-black crawl space in an abandoned house. Rick's smile dropped a bit. "Just an hour," he said. "You came all the way out here. No sense leaving before it's done." I shook my head. "Sorry. I really gotta go." She sounded serious. He stood still for a second, then stepped aside. "All right," he said. "But maybe you come back tomorrow. Early, like today. I'll save the bonus for you." I mumbled something like maybe, and walked toward the stairs. He followed. Didn't say anything, just walked behind me, step for step, as I climbed out of the basement. I grabbed my jacket off the floor near the front door and opened it as fast as I could. He stood in the doorway behind me, watching. "You're a good worker," he said. "Reliable. Not like the last kids." I forced a nod and pushed my bike toward the sidewalk. He stood on the porch for a long minute before going back inside. I didn't look back after that. I never texted him again. The next Saturday, I was back at the burger joint, flipping patties and taking orders like usual. I didn't tell anyone about the basement job, not even my friends. But I kept thinking about it. About the locked door, the scrape marks, the way he just stood there watching, breathing like he was winded even when he wasn't moving. It didn't sit right. I kept thinking I should have done something. Said something. About a month later, my mom was watching the local news and I was half listening from the kitchen. Then I heard the name, Rick. I walked into the living room and saw his face on the screen. Same sunken eyes, same bad teeth. The reporter said he'd been arrested for solicitation of minors and possession of child pornography. The police had been tracking him for weeks after tips came in about suspicious Craigslist ads targeting teens. My chest felt like it was closing. The reporter said Rick had lured kids to empty properties, pretending to offer them cleaning jobs. I knew right then, if I hadn't left when I did, something worse would have happened. Something bad was behind that locked door. Something bad would have happened in that dark room he wanted me to clean. I called the police tip line that same night, gave them the address of the house, told them everything I remembered. The basement, the scrape marks, the weird questions, how he insisted I stay. They took my name and said someone might follow up. I never heard back, but I watched the case for a few weeks after that. He was still in custody when the last article came out. Now I ignore any job post that sounds too good to be true. Especially if it says cash only or work alone. If someone ever asks me to go into a basement alone again, I'm out. No matter how much they offer. Looking back, I think I got lucky. Really lucky. I trusted my gut. I said no before it was too late. And that probably saved me. It happened last summer when my landscaping business was just getting started, and I needed every job I could find. I had been posting my services on Craigslist, mostly basic yard cleanup, mowing, that kind of thing. Business was slow, so I was saying yes to almost every inquiry, even the smaller ones. That's when I got a message from a woman named Valerie. She said she wanted to redesign her front garden beds, pull the old shrubs, lay down new mulch, install some decorative stone borders. The job looked like a 2-day project at most, and she was offering to pay my full asking price without haggling. That already stood out, but I figured maybe she just wanted it done right. Her messages were friendly, polite. She introduced herself, said she had recently gone through a divorce and was looking forward to making the house feel like hers. I thought that made sense. Fresh start, new look. She gave me her address and asked if I could come by the next week. I told her I'd swing by Tuesday morning to take measurements and get started. She didn't push for any discounts or ask for extra services. That's rare in this line of work. Most people try to shave off at least a few bucks. Valerie just said, "I want it to look clean and peaceful. I trust your judgment." The house was in a decent neighborhood, about a 25-minute drive from my place. Single story, brick front, quiet street. When I pulled up, I noticed the yard was a little overgrown, but not too bad. Some old rose bushes, patchy grass, a cracked walkway that looked like it hadn't been edged in years. I got out, walked around to get a sense of the layout. No one came out to greet me, which was a little odd since she said she'd be home. I knocked once, waited, then started taking notes on what tools and materials I'd need. Later that afternoon, Valerie texted to say she had been caught up on a call and apologized for missing me. She said she was excited about the work and would definitely be around on the actual work day. Then she added, "I hope you don't mind if I watch you work a little. I'm fascinated by landscaping." I thought that was a little unusual, but not enough to raise alarms. I replied something casual like, "Sure, no problem. I'll bring ear protection if I use the trimmer though. It gets loud." Over the next few days, we exchanged several texts to confirm details. She wanted dark mulch, preferred flat stone over stacked, and asked if I could also remove a small stump near the edge of the walkway. Totally reasonable. But after a while, the tone of her messages started to shift. At first, it was just chatty. She asked what I liked to plant in my own garden, told me about a fig tree her ex never trimmed. Then she commented on my profile picture on Craigslist. She said, "You look like you enjoy working outside. Bet you get a nice tan." I replied with a thumbs up emoji, kept it light. The next day she sent a selfie. Nothing explicit, just her standing in her kitchen, smiling. She looked early 30s, long brown hair, jeans, and a tank top. She said, "Hope you don't mind a face to go with the texts." I told myself maybe she was just being friendly. Clients sometimes try to build rapport, but the frequency of her messages kept increasing. She started texting in the evening too, asking what I was doing, if I liked working alone, if I ever had clients ask to hang out. She asked if I was single. I replied, "Yeah, just focusing on work right now." I thought that would signal some boundaries without sounding rude. She didn't take the hint. She said she liked confident guys who weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Then she asked what I was planning to wear while working on her yard. That one made me pause. I didn't answer right away. She followed up with, "Just teasing, unless you're curious." At that point, I showed the text to a buddy of mine, and he said it was probably harmless, but to be careful. I decided I'd stick strictly to work talk moving forward. Next morning, Valerie texted again to confirm that I'd be there Tuesday at 9 a.m. sharp. Then she added, "I'll have lunch ready for you. Hope you like grilled chicken and iced tea." I said thanks, but I usually ate on the go. She insisted, said it would be no trouble, and that she was looking forward to meeting me properly. I didn't want to be rude. I figured if I finished by early afternoon, I could eat a quick lunch and head out. In this line of work, people remember when you're polite. They refer you to friends. I told myself it was just hospitality. Still, I made sure to double-check all my gear the night before. I packed extra gloves, kept my phone charged. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right, but the job was decent money, and I really needed it. I arrived at her place Tuesday morning a little before 9. The front door was slightly open when I pulled up. Not wide, just cracked a few inches. There was music playing faintly inside. Something soft, piano maybe. I walked up the drive, rang the bell. No answer. I called out, "Valerie?" Nothing. I stepped back, waited a minute. Still no movement. I started unloading my tools from the truck. I got to work right away, pulling out the old shrubs and clearing the flower beds. The soil was dry and hard, and it took a while just to get everything cleared. Around mid-morning, I realized the decorative stones she wanted were going to need a different layout than we had originally planned. I tried calling her to confirm a couple of things, like whether she wanted a curved border or a straight one, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I left a couple of messages, then texted, but no reply. The blinds on the front windows were closed. I assumed she might be working from home or just busy inside, so I stuck with the original plan. I used a measuring line to keep the stones aligned, laid the fabric barrier down, and began setting the new mulch. It was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. By the time I was wrapping up, it was past 3 p.m. I was hot, covered in dirt, and just wanted to pack up and get home. I started loading the trimmer, rake, and other tools back into the truck bed. That's when I heard the engines. 2 vehicles pulled up fast into the driveway, a red sedan and a black pickup truck. They blocked me in completely, one behind the other. The doors flew open. Valerie got out of the sedan. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back tightly, no smile, arms crossed. She looked straight at me like I was a stranger. Then the guy from the truck stepped out. He was big, broad-shouldered, wearing a stained t-shirt and jeans, and he already looked pissed off. He didn't even look around, just locked eyes on me. I started to speak, to introduce myself, maybe joke lightly that I was just finishing up, but Valerie cut me off. "There he is," she yelled. "That's him. That's the guy who's been harassing me all week." I froze. My brain didn't even register the words at first. She kept talking, loud, panicked. He wouldn't leave me alone. He kept texting, asking if I was alone, sending me pictures, saying he was going to come inside. I said, "What?" But she was already holding her phone out to the man. He snatched it and started scrolling. I took a step forward to explain, but his face twisted up and he pointed at me. "You think this is funny?" he shouted. "You think you can just come around married women trying your luck?" That's when it clicked. She had deleted her side of the conversation. Every flirty message, every selfie, gone. What was left made it look like I'd been hitting on her non-stop. The guy started walking fast toward me. I raised my hands and backed up, saying, "Man, I swear, I have everything on my phone. I didn't..." He turned back toward Valerie, grabbed her by the shoulders. "You told me it was done. You told me you weren't talking to anyone." She looked startled for a second, then angry. "You were spying on me again? You followed me here?" "I live here," he shouted. "You lied to me." And then she did something I still can't believe. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a hatchet. Not a knife. A full-on hatchet, with a wooden handle and a dull red blade cover hanging off it. Before either of us could move, she swung at his shoulder. The blade cut through his shirt and into his skin. He yelled, stumbled back. Blood soaked his sleeve. I stepped back, yelling, "What the hell?" and pulled out my phone. She turned to me like she just remembered I was there. "You!" she shouted. "You ruined everything!" She took a step forward, raised the hatchet again. I backed up fast, nearly tripping over a bag of mulch I hadn't tossed yet. She swung, missed, the blade hitting the edge of the driveway with a loud clack. I turned and sprinted toward the street, still holding my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to hit 911. I was halfway down the block when I saw the first cruiser speed around the corner, lights on, siren blaring. 2 more followed within seconds. I waved them down, pointing back toward the driveway. They pulled in fast, 2 officers jumping out with hands on their belts. One pointed at Valerie and shouted, "Drop it!" She was still holding the hatchet but didn't move. The husband was sitting on the concrete now, bleeding and breathing hard. I stood across the street, phone still in hand, trying to explain to one of the officers who I was and what I was doing there. He asked for ID. I gave him my license and business card. More officers showed up. One talked to the husband, who by now was yelling about how Valerie set him up, how she was playing games again. One officer helped him into the back of a cruiser. Another one handcuffed Valerie and read her rights while she stared blankly at the ground. The first cop I spoke to asked to see our messages. I showed him everything, every message, every timestamp. He looked through it quietly, nodding to himself. "We've been out here before," he said. "Looks like you just got caught in the middle." Turned out Valerie wasn't divorced. She and her husband had been fighting for months, and she'd been using service guys like me to make him jealous. The cops said they'd had 2 calls to that address already that summer for yelling and suspected violence. She had a pattern. Get a guy to come do a job, send flirty messages, then act innocent when her husband blew up. This time she escalated. Way too far. The husband was arrested for assault, Valerie for assault with a deadly weapon. I had to go to the station, give a full statement, send over all my screenshots. I still finished that job. Not that day, obviously. But a week later, after the police cleared it, I went back and finished the damn garden beds. I didn't charge extra. I just wanted it done and over. Since then, I keep everything professional. No exceptions. If a client starts getting too friendly, I end the job. There's no room for charm in business anymore. Not after that. When I was 20, I was dating this guy Jake from college, and we were both really into camping. Nothing fancy, just setting up a tent, cooking on a small fire, and sleeping under the stars. We were broke students, working part-time jobs and scraping by, but we wanted to get out of the city for a weekend. I started browsing Craigslist to see if anyone was offering private camping spots for cheap. It didn't take long to find a post from a guy who claimed he owned some private land near Lake Tahoe. He was renting out clearings for $30 a night. The listing had a bunch of photos showing a big flat area surrounded by trees, a little fire pit made from stones, and what looked like a small trail leading into the woods. The reviews on the post were short, but all positive. Said the guy was chill, the place was clean, and it was quiet. We booked it for 2 nights, Friday and Saturday. We left late Friday afternoon right after our last classes. Jake drove his old Civic, and we threw our tent, a couple sleeping bags, and a cooler into the back. No fancy gear, just basics. It took us maybe 4 hours with traffic to get there, and by the time we pulled into the spot, the sun was starting to drop behind the trees. The GPS directions the guy gave were oddly specific. Turn left at the second mailbox after the ranger station, go down the gravel road for 1.3 miles, then look for a green rope tied to a tree. But it worked. We found it easily. No one else around, just silence and tall pines. The spot was exactly as shown. It was a flat open area maybe 30 feet across, with a ring of stones for a fire pit and logs stacked neatly nearby. We set up the tent while there was still some light, unrolled our sleeping bags, and got a small fire going. Jake cooked hot dogs while I cracked open a couple of sodas. It felt great. Cool air, smoke from the fire, the quiet sounds of birds and trees. There was no reception, which we expected. We didn't bring much food, just sandwiches and a few snacks for the next day. The plan was to hike a trail we found online and maybe take a swim if the lake wasn't too cold. That first night, everything seemed perfect. We stayed up until around 11, watching the fire die down and staring at the stars. No bugs, no noise, nothing but the wind in the trees. We climbed into the tent, zipped it shut, and passed out pretty fast. I remember waking up once from Jake snoring and checking my phone out of habit, even though it had no signal. It was around 12:40 a.m. I rolled over and went back to sleep. Then I woke up again. It was darker, colder. I didn't know what time it was, but I knew something was off. There was a sound, slow, steady crunching of leaves. Not like a rabbit or a raccoon. Heavy. Human. I lay there listening for maybe 30 seconds, hoping it would stop. It didn't. I nudged Jake, but he was dead asleep, not even stirring. The sound got closer. I sat up slowly and unzipped the tent flap just an inch, enough to peek out. There was a man walking around our car. He had a flashlight in one hand and was moving slow, checking the windows, trying the handles. He looked like he was maybe in his 40s, wearing a jacket and a beanie, but I couldn't see his face well. The flashlight beam kept sweeping across the ground, flashing off the side mirrors. My heart was pounding, but I didn't move. Then the flashlight paused, pointed right at the tent. The man had noticed the movement. He turned toward me. Even though the light was in my eyes, I could see he was staring directly at me, not moving, just holding the flashlight on the tent and standing still. I didn't blink. He stayed like that for what felt like minutes. Then, just as slowly, he turned away, walked past the front of the car, and disappeared into the woods behind us. The next morning, everything looked normal. Too normal. Sunlight cutting through the trees, birds chirping like nothing had happened. Jake didn't even remember me waking him up. When I told him about the guy from the night before, he shrugged it off. Probably just the owner doing a late-night check, he said. I wasn't so sure. I tried to let it go and focus on the day. We packed some snacks and hiked a nearby trail we found on an old laminated map nailed to a tree. The trail led us through a ridge with a view of the lake, and for a while, I forgot about everything. We laughed, took pictures, even joked about our crappy old tent falling apart. But even when we were climbing rocks or taking photos, I kept glancing over my shoulder. It felt like we were being watched, even though we didn't see a single person all day. Back at the site, I mentioned leaving early. Jake looked at me like I was overreacting. We paid for 2 nights. Let's just stay and enjoy it. I didn't push him. Maybe I was overthinking. Still, I skipped the campfire that night. I didn't want to draw any attention with the light. We went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to every sound. Around 11 p.m., I heard it. A truck engine in the distance. Not close yet, but getting louder. Jake was dozing off next to me, and I shook his shoulder. Listen, I said. We both sat up. The engine got closer and then stopped suddenly, maybe 50 yards away, just outside the tree line. Through the thin fabric of the tent, I saw faint headlights piercing the darkness. The engine shut off. No one got out. We waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Why aren't they getting out? I whispered. Jake didn't answer. At the 20-minute mark, I knew this wasn't the landowner checking on campers. He would have called out, maybe waved or walked over. This person just sat there, lights off now, hidden in the dark. Around 3 a.m., I must have dozed off for a moment. The sudden sound of gravel crunching jolted me awake. The truck was moving again, closer this time. Much closer. I reached for my phone, but still no signal. The truck stopped maybe 20 feet from us. Then a light, way too bright, flashed on, sweeping over the trees and hitting the tent dead center. Not a flashlight. A mounted spotlight, the kind ranchers use. It moved slowly, back and forth across the tent, like he was scanning for movement inside. Jake whispered, "We should go. Get to the car." We moved quickly but quietly. I shoved the phone into my pocket and grabbed the keys and pepper spray. Jake held the flashlight, but we didn't turn it on. The moment we unzipped the tent, the spotlight locked onto us. Blinding white light. I couldn't see anything beyond it. Then a loud slam, the truck door opening. I raised the pepper spray above my head, hand shaking but holding it high, right where the light could catch the red can. Jake didn't say a word. We stood by the car, not moving, just breathing. The man didn't come closer. He didn't speak. For 10 solid minutes, we were in this standoff. Him in the truck, light in our faces. Us, backs to the car, not sure if we should run or hide. My thumb was already on the trigger of the spray. Then, without a word, the engine revved and the truck backed away, turned, and drove off. No headlights, just gone into the dark. We didn't go back in the tent. We climbed into the car, locked every door, and sat upright for the rest of the night. Every sound made me flinch. Wind in the trees, twigs snapping, the car cooling off. I didn't close my eyes until the sky turned pale gray and the birds started again. I told Jake I wasn't spending another second there. He didn't argue. We packed in 10 minutes and left everything we didn't absolutely need. Tent still wet with dew, dishes unwashed, cooler half full. Didn't care. We just drove. When we got into town and hit a diner with Wi-Fi, I called the sheriff's office, told them everything, about the man near our car, the truck, the spotlight, the standoff. The deputy listened quietly, then said, "You're not the first to say something like this." He explained that they'd had multiple reports about a guy in a pickup truck who stalked campers on private land near the lake. Never officially caught. He watches people set up, then comes back at night looking for expensive gear. Steals when they're asleep. Sometimes confronts people if he thinks they're alone or can be scared off. "You showing that pepper spray probably saved you," the deputy said. "He doesn't like a fight." I went straight back to Craigslist and deleted the post from my saved listings. Never booked a private campsite again. Never even trusted listings without verified reviews. The tent stayed rolled up in the garage for a year. Sometimes I think about that first night. What if I hadn't unzipped the flap? What if we'd stayed asleep that second night? What if the pepper spray hadn't been enough? It wasn't camping that scared me. It was how normal it all looked, right until it wasn't. It happened last year when I was 28 and working as a programmer in Austin. I was living in this 3-bedroom house just outside the city. Nothing fancy, but it had a yard and a garage, and the neighborhood was quiet. Only issue was the mortgage. It was eating me alive. I figured getting a roommate would help, so I posted an ad on Craigslist. Pretty generic stuff. Quiet house, 3rd bedroom available, looking for responsible adult. I wasn't expecting much. Kevin responded that same night. He was 35, said he was a freelance graphic designer, recently unemployed but had enough saved up to cover several months of rent. He wrote very politely, clear grammar, seemed normal. We emailed back and forth for a day, and then I invited him to see the place. He showed up right on time. Average height, kind of thin, short dark hair. Dressed plain, gray hoodie, jeans, beat-up sneakers. He barely talked but came across respectful. Said he didn't party, didn't smoke, no pets. Claimed he spent most days on the computer doing design work. He had good references. I called 2 of his past landlords. Both said he always paid rent on time, never caused trouble. So I offered him the room, and he moved in the following week. He didn't bring much. A couple of boxes, a mattress, some kitchen stuff, and a very expensive-looking computer setup. Multiple monitors, some kind of custom-built tower with glowing fans, and audio gear. He set it all up in his room and shut the door. The first couple of weeks were smooth. We didn't interact much, which was fine by me. He cooked his own food, washed his dishes, always paid rent on time. He even took out the trash a few times without me asking. At night, I'd hear him walking around sometimes, but he never made much noise. Then I started picking up on some odd things. It began with the curtains. I liked keeping the living room bright during the day, so I'd open the blinds in the morning. But whenever I came back from the store or a walk, they were shut again. At first I assumed maybe he just preferred it dark and didn't think much about it. But then I noticed it wasn't just the living room. Every window in the house was always covered, even during the brightest hours. He kept blackout curtains in his room and the kitchen blinds closed at all times. The whole house started to feel like a cave. One morning, I casually asked him, "Hey, do you mind if we keep the blinds open during the day? Just feels kinda gloomy in here." He didn't get defensive, just nodded and said, "Yeah, sorry. I get migraines sometimes. The light bothers me. I'll try to leave them open when I'm not home." He sounded sincere, so I let it go. But the habits didn't stop. He never got any phone calls. I never heard his phone ring once. No video calls either, even though he said he was applying for gigs. He didn't go out much, just quick trips, usually late at night. He'd leave around 11 p.m. and be back before 1 a.m., never saying where he went. I asked once and he said, "Just walking clears my head." That was it. He also never had anyone over. Not once. No friends, no deliveries except for one package that came in a nondescript box. I saw the label. No return address, just a long string of numbers and a warehouse location. The box was heavy, and he carried it straight to his room. Sometimes I'd get up to use the bathroom around 2 or 3 in the morning and see a light under his door. I'd hear faint clicking sounds, like fast typing or maybe video editing. Nothing too strange for someone who works on a computer, I guess, but the frequency was off. He was always up late, never saw him sleep in, always quiet, always alert. Then I caught him in the hallway one night. It was around 3 a.m. I'd just come back from a late shift push. They had me debugging some back-end issue. I came in through the garage, super quiet. As I passed the kitchen, I saw him standing in the dark, facing the sink. No light on, just standing there. I said, "Hey," half joking. "You all right, man?" He turned around slowly and nodded. "Yeah, just getting water." But his hands were empty. He didn't go for a glass. Just walked past me back to his room without another word. I stood there for a minute, trying to process it, then shrugged it off. Over the next week, I started locking my door at night. It felt excessive, but something about the way he moved, silent, like he practiced walking without sound, got under my skin. I also started keeping a bat next to my bed. Not because he did anything directly threatening, but because I couldn't explain the way my gut reacted when I saw him, like a warning light going off in the back of my head. I tried looking him up online, just to feel better. Typed his name, the email he used, even reverse image searched the photo he'd sent me when he applied. Nothing solid came up. No LinkedIn, no portfolio. The 2 references he gave still checked out, but now I was wondering if they were real people or just burner phones. One night, maybe around 1:30 a.m., I heard movement in the hallway again. I stayed in bed, not wanting to deal with anything. But after a minute, I heard the sound of a drawer in the kitchen being opened, slowly, then shut. Then another one. I got up, cracked my door open just a bit, and peeked out. Kevin was standing in front of the silverware drawer, holding it halfway open, just staring inside. He wasn't moving, just standing there, motionless. The room was dark, but there was enough light from the stove clock to see his outline. His hand was gripping something, maybe a knife. I couldn't be sure. He stood like that for maybe 30 seconds. Then he pushed the drawer shut, turned, and walked straight back to his room. About 3 weeks in, it crossed a line. I woke up around 2 a.m. needing to pee. The hallway was dark, quiet. As I walked past my bedroom door, I froze. Kevin was standing in my doorway. Not in the hall, actually inside the frame. In his hands, a small video camera. He wasn't filming, just holding it at chest height like he just lowered it. We both stood still for a second. He looked like I'd caught him mid-thought. "Shit," he said. "Sorry, man. I was sleepwalking. I thought this was my room." He stepped back quickly, eyes wide but voice calm. I must have grabbed the camera from my desk without realizing. Sometimes I move stuff around in my sleep. I didn't respond. Just watched him walk back down the hallway and shut his door. I waited until I heard the click of his lock before moving. I used the bathroom, then went back to my room and locked my door for the first time since living there. I wanted to believe it. Wanted to explain it away as a sleepwalking fluke. But the next morning, I noticed stuff was off. A throw pillow from the couch was in a different spot. One of my jackets had been moved from the coat rack to the back of the sofa. I checked the floor near my bedroom door and saw faint scuff marks. Light, but like someone had been pivoting on their heel. I looked up at the vent above my bed. It was just a metal grate, standard air duct. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he was standing. Too deliberate. Too quiet. That night, I locked my door and pushed a chair under the knob. Slept with one eye open. Every sound made me jump. 2 nights later, I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone with the lights off. Just past midnight, I heard a faint metallic noise. A soft scraping. I held my breath and listened. It was coming from the vent above me. I sat up and turned on my lamp. The noise stopped instantly. I got out of bed slowly and stepped into the hallway, barefoot. The light from my room spilled into the dark corridor. Kevin was standing about 4 feet from my door, back to the wall. In one hand was a screwdriver. In the other, a tiny black object. Looked like a USB drive, but with a pinhole lens. "What the fuck are you doing?" I said. My voice was calm, but low. He didn't move. Just blinked a few times, then held up the camera. I was trying to monitor my sleepwalking episodes. Thought maybe I was doing stuff in the night I couldn't remember. By putting a camera in my vent? He opened his mouth like he was going to say something else, but then just shook his head and looked down. He dropped the screwdriver and camera on the carpet and started backing toward his room. "I'm serious," I said. "You have 24 hours to get your stuff and leave." He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just disappeared into his room and closed the door. I didn't sleep that night. I grabbed a duffel bag, packed clothes, laptop, toothbrush, and drove to the nearest 24-hour Walmart. Parked under a light near the entrance and tried to rest in the back seat. Every few minutes I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting his face to show up in one of them. I didn't want to call the cops, not yet. No crime had technically been committed, and I was afraid it might make him snap. The next evening, just after sunset, I drove back to the house. Pulled up slow, looking at every window before unlocking the front door. The place felt empty, still. His room was cleared out. No monitor set up, no boxes, nothing. Not even trash. I checked the kitchen, bathroom. He was gone. Took everything. Before doing anything else, I grabbed a screwdriver and unscrewed the vent above my bed. The grate came off easy. I reached inside and felt around behind the duct. My fingers touched something plastic. Pulled it out. It was an SD card. No label, just black casing. I plugged it into my laptop. The folders loaded instantly. Dozens of video files, each named with a timestamp. I opened the first one. It was my bedroom, from the foot of the bed. The angle was from inside the vent, facing downward. The timestamp was 2.5 weeks old. The footage ran for over 6 hours. Just me sleeping, tossing, turning, breathing. I clicked another file. Same thing. Me sleeping. Some nights I was on my side, others on my back. One clip had me sitting up briefly, looking around, then laying back down, In the top corner of one video, I could see the glow of the camera lens blinking. I had no idea how I hadn't noticed it sooner. In another folder were images, photos of my room, closet, desk, my nightstand drawer slightly open. One image showed my laptop's screensaver. Another showed a copy of the house floor plan, printed out, with hand-drawn notes and red arrows. Vent access, line of sight, entry route. I felt sick. I called the police right away and filed a report. Showed them the card, the photos, everything. The officer took it seriously, but explained that since Kevin had been a legal tenant, and most footage came from areas he technically had access to, it would be hard to prosecute. Maybe harassment, maybe some kind of privacy violation, but not clear-cut enough for arrest. They took the evidence and promised to follow up. I changed all the locks that night, installed a basic security system and motion lights outside, bought new blackout curtains and started checking the vents weekly. I even swapped bedrooms just to sleep somewhere new, but it didn't help much. I kept thinking about how many nights he'd been standing there, just watching, planning. Since then, I haven't had another roommate. Don't think I ever will. I was 45 and worked full-time at a local auto shop just outside Boulder, Colorado. My hands were always covered in grease, my clothes smelled like oil, and most days I just wanted peace and quiet by the time I clocked out. Mountain biking became my escape. There's a national park about 20 minutes from where I lived, and I'd been riding its trails for over 5 years. I knew every twist and rock on the common paths, and when those got boring, I started browsing local forums and Craigslist posts where riders shared hidden trails. That's how I found the lesser-used routes, the ones where you could ride for hours and never see another person. Those were the ones I liked the most. It was part routine, part therapy. I'd get off work around 5:30, change clothes in the back room, load my bike in the truck, and head straight to the trailheads. I kept to a rotating list of trails, but occasionally I'd try a new one if someone posted a map or coordinates online. The park was massive, and I felt like I was still discovering new spots all the time. I kept my rides to a couple hours max since it got dark quick in the fall. My phone was always charged, GPS on, helmet strapped. I wasn't reckless, just liked to be alone in nature with no engines or yelling. This one trail I started using had shown up in a Reddit thread. Some guy said it was quiet, technical, and empty, which sounded perfect to me. The trailhead wasn't marked, just a faded wooden post and a worn path breaking off the main gravel road. First time I took it, I didn't see a single soul. The ground was dry, rocks were loose, but it had a clear path that wrapped around a long ridge before cutting through a pine-covered slope. You'd get maybe 30 minutes in before it looped back toward a service road. That first ride went smooth. I liked it enough to add it to my usual list. I probably rode that trail 5 or 6 times before anything weird happened. It was late September, about 6:15 when I started out. The sun was dropping fast. I didn't see anyone parked at the start of the gravel road, which was normal. I pushed hard uphill, trying to beat the light. Air was cool, dry, quiet except for tires on dirt and my own breath. No birds, no wind. Around 20 minutes in, just as I reached the part where the trail cuts left up a short incline, I heard a sharp yell from above me on the slope. It didn't sound like someone in pain, more like an angry shout. My first thought was that it was another biker who'd maybe fallen, or someone hiking with their dog. I stopped pedaling and listened. For a few seconds, nothing. Then I heard a loud thud close by. Something hit a tree hard. I looked up the hill and scanned through the trees. The slope was steep, maybe 50 or 60 yards up to a ridge. Then something else slammed into a trunk a few feet to my right. A rock. Someone was throwing rocks at me. I dropped a foot to the ground, still straddling the bike, and backed it slightly down the trail. Another rock hit closer this time, bounced and rolled to my left. That's when I saw the figure. Tall, maybe over 6 feet. Dressed in dark clothing, standing halfway up the slope. He was waving his arms and yelling again, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't sound like English. His movements weren't casual. He was deliberately throwing, aiming. I wasn't about to wait and find out what his deal was. I clipped back in and started pedaling hard, downhill. The trail curved and narrowed, but I didn't slow down. I heard another rock crash somewhere behind me. The guy was too far uphill to chase easily, but I wasn't taking chances. I rode fast until I hit the bottom part of the loop where the trail starts running parallel to the gravel road. My plan was to get back to the truck and leave. No hero stuff, just out of there. As I cut through the last part of the ridge trail, I slowed a bit to check behind me. Nothing but trees and fading light. My heart was racing more from the sprint than fear, but I didn't stop. I stayed on the trail until it spilled out near the parking area. That's when I noticed something that didn't sit right. There was a car parked just off the main road, about 30 feet from my truck. It hadn't been there when I arrived. A dark green sedan, older model. Driver's side door slightly open. I glanced toward it while loading my bike onto the rack. No movement. Windows tinted dark. Could have been anyone's car, but my gut told me it wasn't random. I rushed the straps, not bothering to wipe the frame down. As I backed out onto the gravel, I looked once more and saw that the driver's door was now shut. I didn't hear it close. No one inside. As soon as I started pedaling away, thinking I'd put enough distance between us, I heard him again. Louder this time. Crashing through the underbrush, snapping branches, his boots pounding down the slope like he didn't care if he broke his ankles. I glanced back just once and saw him at full sprint, angling through the trees, still throwing rocks. One of them hit the trail about 5 feet behind my rear tire. That trail wasn't made for speed. Too many sudden dips, tight curves, loose gravel. If I wiped out, I was done. So I kept a steady but fast pace, just enough to stay upright while pushing through the turns. The guy wasn't yelling words anymore, just angry noises. But a few times it sounded like he was screaming, "Get out," or something close. It didn't make sense. I wasn't near any private property. This was national park land. I thought maybe he was just out of his mind, which honestly made it worse. I wasn't dealing with someone angry. I was dealing with someone unpredictable. The trail finally opened up a bit near the bottom, and I saw the main gravel road ahead. I kept going until I reached the small clearing where I'd parked. He stopped once he hit the edge of the trees. Just stood there, breathing hard, watching me. Didn't say anything. Didn't throw another rock. I loaded the bike up without turning my back to him. I could feel him staring like he was deciding whether to come closer. I got in the truck, locked the doors, and backed out. As I pulled onto the road, I looked one last time. He hadn't moved, just standing there like a damn statue in the woods. That night I barely slept. I kept playing it back in my head. How far he chased me. How fast he moved through terrain that should have slowed him down. I told myself it was just a crazy one-time encounter. Maybe a drunk hiker. Maybe someone squatting out there who didn't want visitors. But part of me knew it was more than that. Something about the way he looked. Like he wasn't seeing me as a person. Just as someone who needed to be gone. Next day, I dropped by the ranger station. I'd talked to Bob a few times before. Older guy, used to be a firefighter. Now mostly patrolled trails and dealt with lost tourists. I told him what happened, from the yelling to the chase. He raised his eyebrows a bit but stayed calm. Said maybe it was a bear bluff charge, or a drunk camper. "You sure it was a person?" he asked. I said yes. I saw him. Clear as day. He didn't press further, but said he'd keep an eye on that part of the trail. 3 days later, I got a call from Bob. A married couple, mid-30s, visiting from Arizona, had come into the station shaken up. They'd been hiking the same trail when someone started throwing rocks at them from above. Then came the shouting, then the chasing. They ran nearly a quarter-mile before the guy gave up. Described him as tall, angry, wearing dark clothes. Same as what I'd seen. That changed things. Bob and another ranger set up a patrol for early morning and dusk, hiking in from both ends of the trail. They didn't catch anyone the first day. But the second day, they found something. About 100 yards up the ridge from the first rock-throwing spot, tucked behind a wall of thick pines, there was a shallow cave. Not much more than a hollow, really. Inside, they found what Bob later described as a mess of intentional chaos. Old sleeping bags, trash, dozens of collected rocks in small piles, tree branches stacked like weapons, several slingshots, clearly handmade. The fire pit had burned down bottles melted in it. They found wrappers, scraps of food, and a plastic gallon jug filled with brown water. The place reeked of sweat and mildew. It wasn't a campsite. It was a hideout. They left a trail cam nearby and came back the next morning. Just before sunrise, the camera picked him up returning to the cave. That's when they moved in. He didn't fight, didn't say much at all, just stared at the ground as they walked him out. No ID on him. It took 2 days to figure out who he was. His name was Richard, 52 years old. Used to be a construction worker in Denver. Lost his job 6 months back after an injury and couldn't keep up with rent. His wife left. Started drinking, then spiraled. He ended up living out of his car until that got towed. Eventually, he made his way into the park and never left. Bob said he might have been out there nearly 2 full months. Richard never filed any permits, never talked to rangers, just disappeared into the woods. He started viewing anyone on the trail as an invader. He wasn't trying to rob people or hurt them, just scare them off. Territorial, like a wild animal. The ranger said he was clearly deep into withdrawal and possibly suffering from some kind of psychosis or severe stress. He had no history of violence before that. No weapons either, just rocks and whatever he could throw. They transferred him to a detox facility, then into a state-run rehab program. Bob told me later that Richard didn't remember chasing anyone. Thought he was just trying to protect his space. No charges were filed, and after a few weeks, the trail reopened. It wasn't really scary anymore once I knew the full story. It was just sad. A guy slipping through the cracks until he became something people were afraid of. Still, I changed my habits. No more solo rides on the lesser-known trails. I stuck to the main paths, especially near dusk. I started carrying a whistle, too. Not because I expected trouble, just so if anything ever happened again, someone might actually hear it. I still ride that park, still love the quiet, but I watch the tree lines more closely now.